Meeting of the Strategic Policing and Crime Board on Tuesday, 28th November 2023 at 10 a.m. My name is Simon Foster and I'm the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner. I am joined this morning, or will be joined this morning, by members of the board, the Deputy Chief Constable, Assistant Chief Constable, police officers and staff, and representatives from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We have, as ever, times attached to the agenda items, and I'll be having regard to these in the interest of an effective and efficient meeting, and so that we can conduct the business within the time allocated for the meeting. Of course, if during the meeting people wish to come into the meeting and contribute, then by all means raise your hands and I'll bring you into the meeting as soon as I am able to do so. Agenda item 1 is apologies and Police and Crime Commissioner update. We have apologies from the Chief Constable. Are there any other apologies to be provided this morning?
There's none from us, Commissioner, but I think it's worth noting this morning, given that one of the actions we made is the engaged status in the force, is that the Chief Constable is on duty. He's in Manchester yesterday and today. Like all other chief officers, he has a national responsibility. He is for professional standards, and today and yesterday is the annual conference for heads of professional standards. Includes key stakeholders, King's Council, JIOPC and other strategic stakeholders. As the National Lead for it, can't miss it. He is in regular contact with you. That's where he is today. I can't be here. I'm
grateful for that, Deputy Chief Constable. My Police and Crime Commissioner update this month is as follows. Firstly, on the 23rd of November, HMIC formally notified West Midlands Police of its decision to move the force to enhance monitoring in connection with 4 areas of concern. I do not agree with that decision, and that is a view that is shared by the Chief Constable. However, today I am challenging West Midlands Police to resolve the 4 areas of concern and have the force removed from enhanced monitoring within record time by the 31st of March 2024 at the latest. I'm treating this matter with the utmost seriousness and as a top priority. I've immediately met with the Chief Constable and holding him to account to ensure he prepares and implements an effective action plan in order to resolve the areas of concern as a matter of urgency. Action has already been taken and continues to be taken to drive significant improvements within West Midlands Police, and that includes transforming 999 and 101 performance and the largest crime reductions by volume of any force in the country. I've been repeatedly warning the government that its reckless cuts to policing, which even after the so-called police uplift left West Midlands Police with about 1,000 fewer officers than it had in 2010, and that has caused immense damage to the force. Today's announcement by His Majesty's Inspectorate is yet further evidence of the damage inflicted on West Midlands Police and the people of the West Midlands by the government, and I trust the government can appreciate the consequences of its own actions. It's important to note as well that the decision is based on data that is already between 8 to 11 months old, predates the launch of the new neighbourhood policing strategy on the 3rd of April 2023, and does not have regard to the action that has already been taken to address the 4 areas of concern. And that is why the decision taken is in many respects a reflection of what was rather than what is. Secondly, on the 2nd of November, on the 6th of November, I wrote to the Mayor and Home Secretary, drawing attention to their government's appalling record on policing crime, community safety and criminal justice over a period of 13 years. It has had serious adverse consequences for police visibility and presence, response times, the conduct of investigations, and the ability of West Midlands Police to prevent, tackle and reduce crime and protect the vulnerable. That has all taken its toll on police officers and staff and the people of the West Midlands. Enough is enough. The very last thing the people of the West Midlands need is a representative of the government responsible for inflicting that catastrophic damage on policing and our justice system, taking on responsibility for policing governance in the West Midlands. My concern is that the people I represent will end up having to pay the price all over again. I was elected on a clear mandate from the electorate that the West Midlands retains its democratically elected and directly accountable Police and Crime Commissioner. That commitment is also set out in my Police and Crime Plan. I remain committed to that pledge, and I therefore repeat my challenge to the Mayor to have the courage, the integrity and the principles to put it to the people and let the people decide who they want to represent them as their democratically elected and directly accountable Police and Crime Commissioner on the 2nd of May 2024. Governance of policing is too important to be vested in a Mayor who will in reality simply appoint one of his friends to the role based on political patronage. That is fundamentally undemocratic and it's unacceptable in the West Midlands. It is, after all, 2023, not 1723. Let it be the people's vote, the people's choice and the people's decision as to who represents them as their police and crime commissioner. Thirdly, on the 10th of November, I opened my West Midlands Anti-Slavery Day conference. At school, I learned that in 1807, slavery was abolished in Great Britain and its empire, and in 1833, the slave trade was abolished. It turns out that nothing could have been further from the truth. In the West Midlands, I'm commissioning and supporting a number of interventions to support victims of modern slavery and human trafficking, and that includes the West Midlands Modern Slavery Network, the Independent Modern Slavery Advocate, the Safeguarding Adult Slavery Case Conference, and the Black Country Women's Modern Slavery Community Engagement Service. Just as in the 19th century, it took a coalition of committed, determined, and tenacious people and organisations over many decades to end traditional slavery, including campaigners, faith groups, politicians, the law, enslaved communities, and enforcement. It'll take a modern day coalition, equally committed, determined, and tenacious, to eliminate the scourge of modern slavery from the 21st century. We're committed to ending the scourge of modern slavery within the West Midlands. Finally, on the 22nd of November, a new generation of 16 youth commissioners was elected to serve as my youth commissioners for the West Midlands for a 2-year term of office. It's important to note that they have all been elected by their peers and not simply appointed. They've therefore earned the right to be youth commissioners. The role of a youth commissioner is to represent the views of young people and to stand up for the rights of young people from across the West Midlands. They'll also advise me about matters that are of importance to them and assist me in holding the Chief Constable and West Midlands Police to account. They will also be provided with the opportunity to gain a unique insight into policing, community safety and criminal justice. And I look forward to meeting and welcoming my youth commissioners at Lloyd House this evening for their induction. Agenda item 2 is notes of the last meeting on Tuesday, 24th of October, 2023. Are there any matters arising from the notes of the last meeting? Don't see anybody indicating, so those minutes will be agreed. Agenda item 3 is a petition in connection with Brierley Hill Police Station. And I offer a warm welcome to Councillors Adam Davis and Wayne Little, who are here to present the petition. I'm grateful to both of you for your attendance and for taking the time to join us this morning. Please kindly present your petition. You have 3 minutes, please, to do so in order that both myself and West Midlands Police have an opportunity to respond. Thank you. So over to you.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Adam Davis, and along with my colleague, Councillor Wayne Little, I represent Brierley Hill and Worsley South on Dudley Council. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to present this petition to you and make some representations to you this morning. Along with many of the residents we represent in Brierley Hill and Worsley South, and many residents across the Dudley Borough, we're deeply concerned by the plans announced to close our existing police station, the headquarters of the police in Dudley Borough, move it away from Brierley Hill, which is geographically and strategically the centre of the Dudley Borough, and move it to a new location, which is right on the northern edge of the borough. I'm sure many are aware of the mapping in Dudley, but just on this map here, you can see the black cross marks roughly where Brierley Hill Police Station currently is. It's roughly in the centre of the borough. Response times in all directions are roughly the same. The new proposed location is where the red cross is, right on the edge of the borough. I'm sure you'll be able to find a map online, but that station, that proposed location, will be far closer to Tipton, Oldbury and Wednesbury, places it wouldn't serve, than it would be to places like Brierley Hill, King Swinford, Wordsley and Stourbridge, which it should be serving and it is meant to serve. So as we only have a few short minutes, I'll briefly summarise the concerns that this brings about for us. Our ward in particular already suffers a disproportionate level of crime. In fact, it is designated by West Midlands Police as an impact area in an effort to organise resources in a way which reduces this crime levels. We fully appreciate that a police station or a police building can't itself go on the beat and catch the bad guys. But we do know that when criminals know there is a police station nearby, they are less likely to commit crimes. Residents feel a greater sense of assurance that they know where to go if they need to speak to a police officer or the police face to face. And it's easier for police officers who are at the station to respond quickly when needed if they are closer to the place where they are needed. Therefore, we and those who have signed this petition strongly feel that these plans need to be changed. We're calling on West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner to do one of the following. Ideally, leave our existing police station where it is in Brierley Hill. The location makes sense. Or if creating a new police HQ for the Dudley Borough, locate this new HQ in Brierley Hill as the recognised strategic centre of the borough. This would make far more sense than the current proposal, which would take our police further away from the communities that they're meant to represent. Or finally, if going ahead with this new proposal at Castlegate, which we think is a mistake, we think it is wrong, and we think it will do harm to the crime figures locally, that the existing station in Brierley Hill should not be closed until a suitable new location with neighbourhood response and front desk teams is fully operational in the ward. We've seen a situation in Stourbridge where the station was closed, a commitment was given to a replacement, and that's still not being delivered. We can't have something like that in Brierley Hill. So if a commitment is not given to one of these options, we really do worry that crime rates will only worsen as a direct result of what we think is a poorly conceived plan in the first place. So we politely but strongly urge you to consider the points we have raised, keep our police station where it makes sense, and drive down crime rates rather than risk increasing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. In terms of my response, I would say that police stations are, of course, important because they provide a visible and reassuring presence for communities. Sadly, as a consequence of the severe financial pressures that have been placed on police forces in recent times, tough choices have had to be made between maintaining and prioritising police officer and staff numbers or police buildings. And that's why well over 600 stations are closed across the country. The West Midlands Police budget remains under severe pressure. This year, West Midlands Police have had to make cuts of £28 million, and they're going to have to make cuts of a further £22 million in the next financial year as well. It's important to understand, too, that decisions relating to the police estate are based on the independent and impartial operational policing judgment of the Chief Constable as to what he requires to provide an effective and efficient police service in the West Midlands, and of course including in the Dudley local policing area. The decision to dispose of Brierley Hill Police Station was made 2 years ago in November 2021 at the time of that particular estate strategy review, and it was to be replaced by a new Dudley Police HQ, and that decision remains in place following the estate strategy review that was concluded in October 2023 at my last board meeting. Indeed, I'm able to share with you today, in actual fact, that West Midlands Police have now completed purchase of the building that will be the location of the new Dudley Police HQ. And I've carefully considered the petition, and I'm grateful to both of you for coming along this morning and for attending and presenting the petition, and also for outlining your further representations. So I'm going to respond to the three requests for the petition as follows. Firstly, the decision remains that Brierley Hill Police Station will be disposed of with a projected delivery date of not before winter of 2025. Secondly, the new Dudley Police HQ will be in Dudley Town Centre. And thirdly, you have my assurance that Brierley Hill Police Station will not be disposed of until the neighbourhood policing team has been relocated or co-located locally to a suitable alternative base within Brierley Hill, so as to ensure that the neighbourhood policing team remains within the community it serves, which is exactly where it needs to be. That alternative base will not be a public contact office. However, response locations remain under review within the Dudley local policing area. I'm now going to pass over to Pete Gillett, who is the Director of Commercial Service of West Midlands Police, so that he can set out West Midlands Police's position.
Commissioner, thank you, and colleagues, thanks for joining us today. Very much appreciate your time. So the Chief Constable's asked me to respond today and provide some operational assurance on the points that you've raised. So attendees may well be aware of the Chief Constable's new operating model that was introduced in April of this year. That's very much based on the geographic model, really enhancing and improving the service that we provide to local communities, very much a local policing based model, not just including the old neighbourhood teams, but also kind of an improved approach to investigations and response. So absolutely very clear that that's at the heart of our estate strategy approach as well. The estate strategy supports kind of that new operating model. The move, as the Commissioner says, to the new Dudley HQ site, unlike the current Brierley Hill site, will provide more modern, fit-for-purpose facilities for officers to better support the communities of both Brierley Hill, Stourbridge and the wider Dudley area. She's also asked me to really emphasise and stress the point that the Commissioner made, that we will be retaining, obviously, a really high police presence within Brierley Hill. And before relocating to the new site, as the Commissioner said, we'll ensure that we've secured a new base in Brierley Hill for neighbourhood policing teams and Merry Hill officers. Only once relocated into those new premises would the existing sites be vacated, as the Commissioner has said. As well as securing that base within Brierley Hill, we'll also secure a policing base in Stourbridge Town for Stourbridge and Lyne neighbourhood policing schemes that are currently based at Brierley Hill. Further, in line with the operating model, additional response locations, as the Commissioner said, will remain under review as we look towards the new Dudley LPA HQ and the kind of where we're locating the neighbourhood team. So very much keeping response under review from that perspective. I think while we continue to see a decrease in footfall across our public contact offices, it's absolutely important to stress that. But we do see an increased use of digital, telephony and other online ways of contacting West Midlands Police. We're absolutely committed to providing that physical site by which members can access services they need. The relocation of the public contact office from Brierley Hill to Dudley will have no operational impact on the business of the force or the service we provide communities. The public contact office will remain open from 8 until 10 each day, 8 in the morning till 10 in the evening. So really, from an operational policing perspective, the Chief really wanted me to ensure that we provide that assurance in terms of delivery, absolutely enhancing the approach that we've got with the local policing model that's been introduced, and to absolutely ensure that our estate enables us to function in that way to serve our residents and communities in the best way possible within the area.
Thank you, Peter. I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add. I think in all fairness, councillors, we do have some short time available under this agenda item, so I'm very happy to hand back to you in order to enable you to make a response to that.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a few points there. I suppose we'll start with your own comments at the beginning, Commissioner. Obviously, you talked about financial pressures, and yes, that is very true. However, in this particular case, there's no reason that I can see that a police station headquarters in Brierley Hill would cost any more than a new site on the edge of the borough in Castlegate. We're not asking for a second station. We're asking for the one station you are proposing to build to be in a location that makes sense. That actually ties in with the comments there from the Director of Commercial Services about the public-facing office. Now, that will mean, this plan would mean that the public-facing office will be right on the corner of the borough. It will be harder to get to for members of the public. We've also heard there that while you're happy to give us a commitment in terms of neighbourhood teams, we haven't got a commitment in terms of response teams, and clearly it isn't part of the plan, the existing plan, the plan that we're challenging, to have a public-facing office in Brierley Hill. Brierley Hill is a well-connected location. People from all over the borough can get to Brierley Hill. It makes more sense for a public-facing office to be in Brierley Hill than it does to be up right on the edge of the borough at Castlegate. But in terms of the bare bones of this plan, and Commissioner, you talked about the location being decided 2 years ago. That was under a previous policing model. That was where officers who will be based at this new headquarters would likely also be serving Sandwell. Under the new policing model, my understanding is that those officers and teams will not be servicing Sandwell. They will be servicing only the Dudley Borough. So this location has been decided with serving Dudley and Sandwell in mind. Now we've got a new policing model, one which I agree with, one which I think is hopefully going to deliver better results. the location of the station, it makes far more sense to revisit that, because now this station, this headquarters, will only be to serve the Dudley Borough. And at the moment, the location that's been proposed at Castlegate would not do that effectively. So there are a few points I wanted to raise. Councillor Little, I don't know if you wanted to bring anything else in.
No, I think you've covered all that there, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. So if you could take those points, have you got any comments on those particular points?
I can certainly come back to you in connection with a number of those points, and perhaps also pass over to Peter if he's got anything else he wants to add. I mean, in terms of the building itself at Briley Hill, it is in poor condition. I think personally, of all the buildings that I've visited since I've been Police and Crime Commissioner across the West Midlands, and I haven't visited every single police building in the West Midlands, I emphasise, but of those that I have visited, I think it's fair to say that Briley Hill was probably the police station, the police building that was in the worst condition that I observed whilst visiting police buildings across the West Midlands. It is currently, I believe, subject to a substantial backlog maintenance of about £1.5 million, which is obviously a significant amount of money. And there, of course, are limitations around the ability to be able to adapt the building, or, for example, open plan organisation in order to make it sure that it's fit for kind of 21st century policing. It's not a very efficient or effective building in that sense. It has significant limitations, and there are some other practical limitations relating to it as well, in terms of it being within a conservation area and the ability to be able to make adaptations to it. I understand what you say about the decision that was made and the alteration in the new neighbourhood policing operating model that was implemented on the 3rd of April. That's understood, but I do emphasise that Briley Hill Police Station will not be going anywhere. You have my assurance of this. It will not be going anywhere until a suitable alternative location has been identified for the local neighbourhood policing team. And although it won't be a public contact officer, it is still the case that the location of the response teams is under review. So that is still a matter to be determined as yet. So that would be my immediate response. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Peter.
Commissioner, very little. I think you've covered particularly the state of the current station at Briley Hill. When it comes to things like backlog maintenance and condition and ability to house a modern policing facility. So I think you've covered those, Commissioner. I would just kind of emphasise the point that kind of you kind of mentioned around, you know, that's that site, Castlegate area site, was kind of, you know, identified previously. Actually, we looked at it very, very closely from its ability to support the new operational policing model. Specifically, the Chief Constables actually had several visits, done a lot of work in terms of response times and so on. And absolutely, from an operational perspective, we feel it's a very suitable building to house the local HQ, particularly as it's going to be supported by, as the Commissioner says, those local sites. Where our neighbourhood teams will be based.
Yeah, I'll just add a few points there.
I
don't know the building at Castlegate, and I wouldn't question the suitability of the building itself. It's the location of the building, which I think is the big issue here. I've noticed there wasn't a comment there, a response about the location of the front-facing office being right on the corner of the borough on the northern edge, making it harder for residents where we represent, also residents in Stourbridge and Hales Own, for them to get to the front-facing office. There wasn't a response there. That is a big part of what I think a headquarter station should provide, and I think basically for 3/4 of the borough, this new location takes away having a public-facing office, and residents will not feel comfortable moving to travelling up to Castlegate where it is now. Also, it's Castlegate's reference to the town centre location. It's not actually town centre, it's an out of town park, so it's not town centre. So that is quite disappointing there.
Finally, to add on, opportunities that do exist within the strategic centre of Briley Hill. So as Dudley Borough is, it's named Dudley, but the strategic centre is known as the Briley Hill through its geographical location, transport links and future investment opportunities that are coming to Briley Hill, with lots of land and available potential sites where that headquarters for Dudley Policing headquarters could be considered and placed. We probably haven't got the time now to go through those parts of land and best positions, but there are, as we've looked at, areas around the Dudley area where, you know, we feel would make sense to be an alternative to the current proposal at Castlegate.
So just to wrap that up, so if we're happy, we're pleased that there's a commitment to neighbourhood service being located in the ward, but it is that response team and the front-facing public desk that we think also needs to be included in any location for it to be suitable. And that we have used that word suitable because we don't just want it to be a token gesture location where residents are told that the neighbourhood teams are based, but actually that doesn't really benefit local residents. And actually, as I said in my closing comments at the beginning, we are deeply concerned that the location of this new police station and basing, if our response teams are based further away from Brierley Hill, which again is an impact area as designated by West Midlands Police, that crime rates will worsen. So we think that it needs to be neighbourhood response and front desk accessibility at whatever location can be found in Brierley Hill. And as Councillor Little says, there are locations in Brierley Hill that we think should be considered. Again, we're in a new policing model now, so relying on a decision that was taken 2 years ago, I don't think is fit for purpose.
And I think on behalf of all Dudley residents, we welcome West Midlands Police looking at the Dudley Borough, the investment that's going into it in order to drive down crime. So thank you for that on behalf of everybody, every Dudley Borough and Brierley Hill. Our point is to tweak that to make sure that we get the best location so as all Dudley Borough residents are getting the same level of service and not, as it appears to be, that may just be being better delivered in a northern part of the borough rather than across it. So we welcome it. We're just trying to make sure that is a more central location where we can hopefully meet the needs of everybody on a more equal footing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I speak on behalf of West Midlands Police and myself in saying that we would very much welcome working with you in order to identify that suitable alternative police base in the locality of Brierley Hill. That would be very helpful. And so any input you can make in order to facilitate identifying that suitable alternative base would be very welcome. And I see Peter nodding. Very much welcome the opportunity to work with you to identify that suitable alternative base. In the interest of time, we're going to have to unfortunately conclude this agenda item, but I would just say thank you so much for coming along and articulating your concerns and the concerns of your local residents. That's much appreciated. I'm very pleased that you've taken the time to come along and do that. Thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Moving then on to agenda item 4 is questions from members of the board. We have 2 questions from members of the board today, and both questions are from board member Bhupinder Garpal. Can you please ask your first question, Bhupinder?
Thank you, Commissioner. Can the Chief Constable please share information with the board if any arrests have taken place across the West Midlands by anyone openly supporting the terrorist group Hamas?
Thank you. The quick answer is yes, I can, and no, they haven't. So yes, I can share the information, but I can give you a bit more background. Nobody has been arrested for openly supporting the Hamas within the West Midlands. We have a bespoke operation, which is BioTAS, which is our response to the policing of protest activity associated with both sides of the protest movement, so there are passionate voices on both sides. Our role within that is to police impartially, and actually in the very first days of the current conflict, the Chief Constable wrote out to the whole force about our role, emphasising our need for impartiality, and met with representatives from a number of communities across the borough. We take a phased and graduated response to all protest activity. That includes under Chief Superintendent Sarah Burton, our ops portfolio. Where we've got a bespoke operation running and a silver commander operating from C3, we have had members of IAGs sat in the silver suite, so they are able to firstly share views with the commander, but also the commander to seek opinions, and that's proven to be really useful. There are actions that an individual could conduct, so particularly in relation to chanting is a good one. So there are words that I could chant on my own, might not be an offence. I could chant them on the streets that might not be an offence, but depending on the context, on who else is present, what the intention is, that could be an offence. Over the last weekend, we had some protest activity where the commanders on the ground took the decision to use evidence gathering teams to film those involved in it, so that in slower time, we don't have to inflame the situation there and then. We can gather evidence and then subsequently review it and then make the decisions in consultation with both investigators and sometimes lawyers. Have offences been committed, and if so, what's the proportion of response to that? It is important that West Midlands Police, in line with all the other forces, try to be as consistent as we can in this issue. So we have some national guidance that has come from both the Metropolitan Police, but also the Crown Prosecution Service, which tries to set out the context of the things that would be offences and the things that are not. They are not easy things to police. But at this moment in time, I'm satisfied that we've got the balance right. We are experienced in terms of policing protest. We've got really experienced commanders on the ground. And hopefully all of those involved in that protest activity, wherever they stand within the debate, would be satisfied that the role of the police is one that we have been impartial, we have been sensitive, and we have addressed offences when they've been committed.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Constable. Depending, would you like to ask your second question, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. Could the Chief Constable please tell the board what checks are being made to ensure that all victims of crime are provided with regular updates from the investigating officers? Does the Chief Constable think texting victims of crime is a good way of communication?
So I suppose it's right to start this answer by touching on the victim services assessment, which took place between January and March, which is one of the assessment criteria that has informed HMIC's penal judgments of the force. And one of the causes of concerns is that the force is inadequate at investigating crime because of the sample of crimes that they're reviewed, quality of investigation plans, supervisory oversight, and the level of contact with victims was not where we want it to be. Again, it's important, as the Chief has done publicly, to acknowledge that that was an assessment of crimes between January and March, when the Chief had only been in post for a couple of months. I was not in the force at that point in time. And most importantly, it was prior to the change in the operating model. So we acknowledge and accept that we have got work to do in the totality of that space, which is about the churn of our volume investigations, not big investigations, the churn of our volume investigations, which is why under ACC Bell, we've got an operation called Vanguard, which is designed to improve the totality, the quality of all of our investigations. And we are happy with the progress of that so far, but of course, proof will be in the pudding. To support that, then, we have developed a dashboard which allows all of us, including chief officers, to review our compliance with the Victims Code of Practice. By coincidence, not knowing that this was going to be a question today, it goes live this week, that dashboard, which allows us to measure the 12 areas of the Victims Code of Practice and our compliance with it. So, for instance, in relation to Right 6, everybody should be getting updates in line with a personal contact plan. For an enhanced update, that would be victim updated within 1 day of any key events. For a standard contact plan, for victims updated within 5 days of any key events. The method of communication, so some of that is automated either by text message, email or letter. That has been developed by a Task and Finish group, which included victim representation. They have been engaged and involved in the final version of it. We have also involved Bernardo's in it to make sure that our messages are trauma informed. And each of those decisions is a bespoke decision. So not all victims of crime are updated by that. So entitled to choose the way that they are updated. All of this has been coupled with the use of victim and community voices through IAGs, through partnerships and other stakeholder engagement to ensure that the process that we've designed has not been designed by us, it's been by others. So the totality of all of that will then be reported into individual chief officers so that they can review their individual departments. It also then will form a suite of data which will come to my force performance board to allow me the opportunity to hold the whole of the force to account, in particular the 7 LPA commanders, because they own the churn of most investigations, to allow me to assess our compliance with the Victims Code of Practice, to ensure that we are raising our standards in terms of that victim services assessment, and where appropriate we are ensuring that we're using bespoke updates to victims of crime. We're not texting somebody who is not tech savvy and now has asked us to go and speak to them in person. So there will be a blend, but we do deal with a lot of crime. We have today around 30,000 open crimes. We record about 900 crimes a day. So there's a lot of people to keep updated, and some of those will need updating in an automated way.
Just for clarity, just for clarity, Commissioner, if I may then. So people who are not tech savvy, who are not very savvy on, social media, etc. So you will make an effort of contacting them by phone call or if a personal visit can be done. I know you stretch the resources, but
So two things. So there's 8,000 police officers. I don't think they're stretched for resources. There's 8,000 of us, and I don't want our officers to get into the mindset of that they're stretched. There's 8,000 of us on our jobs to serve the public. But in each individual victim of crime has got rights under the Victim Code of Practice. And if they tell us, I can't use a mobile phone, that's not the way it's been updated, then we'll pick up the phone and contact the code. There's lots of other ways.
thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Constable, and thank you, Bhupinder Garkal. We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is the West Midlands Firearms Operations Unit. This agenda item is to be presented by Assistant Chief Constable Mike O'Hara. And if you could limit your presentation to no more than 10 minutes, on the basis we will have an opportunity to read the papers. They're available to members of the public if they want to read them, and to maximise the opportunity for comments, questions, matters arising. So over to you, Assistant Chief Constable.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Mike O'Hara, ACC Operations. I've also got Chief Superintendent Sarah Burton, the Head of Operations, with me as well. Thanks for the opportunity to outline the work being done in this respect. Clearly, the paper's been submitted. I'll take it as read. But if you would allow me just a few minutes just to frame that paper, I'd be grateful. You'll be aware the West Midlands Police and Crime Plans explicitly references supporting a more diverse workforce in specialist teams, which I think is particularly pertinent here. It says the following: simply hiring a wider range of officers is not enough. We need to ensure that the new, more diverse intake experience the workplace in a way that makes them want to continue to serve and can advance fairly through the ranks and into specialisms disproportionately preserve of white male officers. So you'll be aware of some national press interest emanating from allegations of misconduct, grievance, employment tribunal relating to the West Midlands Police Firearms Operations Unit. Now, the purpose of this report is to reassure the Commissioner and the public regarding the culture, the standards and the practices of our firearms unit. Now, clearly the PCC did not request or ask for an overview of the operation performance of the department, but I would just want to highlight that we do have the busiest armed policing unit outside of London. We deployed to over 7 armed incidents every single day, over 50 a week, and the operational delivery is of the highest and most professional standard. As a result, nationally, West Midlands Police Firearms Unit has a very strong reputation. So the department's divided into 3 areas of business: our armed response vehicles, our tactical firearms team and our training team. You'll be aware that each of those is a very bespoke role, and they have a range of additional capability as we work through those areas of business. The paper is clear. The department is headed up by the Head of Department, Chief Inspector Lisa Edwards, and the Head of Operations, as I've outlined, is Sarah Burton. Very helpfully, both are heavily involved, both regionally and nationally, in improving diversity and inclusion in police firearms teams. And they're both seen as very influential and very much at the forefront of this work, both with me and with the NPCC Chief Lead, Simon Chesterman. You'll be aware, I'm sure, that the recent employment tribunal and grievance involving a former West Midlands Police firearms officer identified their experience concerning behaviour and attitudes within our firearms unit over a 9-year period in 2012 to 2021. As a result of these concerns, over a year ago now, I stood up a goal group, Operation Alma, and this has a very clear strategic intent and documented objectives to ensure delivery on behalf of the West Midlands Police and the broader public. One of the key aspects of Operation Alma related to the commissioning of an independent cultural assessment of the department. Now, again, helpfully, you may be aware of the Liverpool John Moore's academic research into police firearms teams nationally, and its number one recommendation is to conduct a cultural audit of firearms teams and firearms units nationally. So we're sort of a little bit ahead of the curve nationally in that respect. So within West Midlands Police, this work was overseen by an independent superintendent, not from the operations environment, supported very heavily by Dr. Darren Ralph and his diversity and inclusion team, who are experts in their field nationally. So the paper highlights at quite a high level the approach taken to this cultural audit, which I think is very important. It's born out of Edgar Schein's cultural model, and it effectively talks about 3 levels of culture. First, it talks about the working environment and the physical environment. Then it talks about espoused values, so policies, processes, training. But then most importantly, it also talks about the underlying values and beliefs of officers and staff within the team. And that is one of the most important parts of the cultural assessment. What this cultural assessment did do was provided us with a very comprehensive assessment of the totality of the department and generated 40 recommendations for us to focus on in tackling a wide range of issues. And these recommendations have been consolidated with work that was already ongoing that Sarah has been leading with her senior leadership teams. And on page 5 of the report, you'll see the 10 key themes highlighted within the range of work that's been conducted in the Firearms Operations Unit. So the action plan of activity is advancing, but just some highlights of the progress being made and that are documented in the paper include the following. We have seen a very slight improvement in the representation of the department, particularly for Black and ethnic minority officers, moving from 6% to 10%. However, I would say that I think we need to hold our nerve in this respect. This is going to take several years for us to try and improve the representation, not only in the West Midlands Police as a whole, but specifically operations and then the Firearms Operations Unit moving forward. We have opened up the department to familiarisation sessions and open days, working very closely with staff associations. I think very importantly, we've implemented very strong and compliant Equality Act processes with additional training and upskilling, particularly in the training department, which has been recognised nationally as very good practice. We've provided a good range of reasonable adjustments accommodating physical and neurodiverse conditions. And probably quite importantly, there's a big piece of work around inclusivity around officers becoming authorised firearms officers. And within the training department, they've created individual training modules, which effectively mean that those with caring responsibilities don't have to work away from home for long periods of time. So it creates more flexibility and is clearly more inclusive. We've documented our approaches in relation to ensuring the accessibility of every single training venue and location that we use, both on and off site. But I think key to this work is the work on the leadership. So there's done an awful lot of work now supporting and developing our supervisors and our leaders within the department with continuous professional development on leadership skills, standards, welfare, well-being and conduct. We've worked hard also to bring the department closer to communities and in light of the new operating model that's been referenced this morning, clearly closer to LPAs. And this has included rotating sergeants out of the FOU and into LPAs to remind them of the importance of closer work with the communities and the impact that our work has on the communities, including some good work flowing from the City of Culture and an understanding of community trauma when we deploy into a community. Also importantly, and a specific issue raised within the press, female firearms officers are part of our Uniform and Equipment Board, and they are involved in trialling and assessing all new uniform and equipment to ensure it meets their requirements. We've introduced new arrangements to procure female-specific uniform and equipment, and some reassurance. Every single firearms officer who is a female has been issued with equipment which is specific to their individual needs, including formed ballistic protection. We've reviewed and developed how courses, overtime and promotion opportunities are distributed within the department. And as part of that work, the head of department also conducts regular team and individual workforce health reviews, looks at skills, performance, health, attendance, overtime, conduct, etc. But ultimately, there has been a renewed focus on the code of ethics and the standards of professional behaviour, with specialist training from the diversity and inclusion team, from professional standards, to ensure the highest standards and an inclusive and respectful environment where everyone can be their best in WMP. This includes challenging reporting poor behaviour, use of social media, etc. I think it's clear from the chief through the executive team and through the rest of the organisation, there is no place for misogynistic, discriminatory or disrespectful behaviour in policing, and we are working very hard to set and reinforce the highest professional standards in WMP. But just before I conclude, under the strong leadership of Chief Superintendent Sarah Burton, officers and staff from the firearms unit have worked hard over the last 2 years to improve culture, standards and the working environment, and significant progress has been made, but more work is yet to be done. These steps are very important, and the MPCC lead for armed policing, Simon Chesterman, is clear that this isn't a West Midlands issue, this isn't a firearms issue, this is a national policing issue. West Midlands Police and other forces, including his own force, the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, have had some very high profile and concerning cases. And a quote from Mr. Chesterman specifically for this morning, he states that the manner in which West Midlands Police are tackling the issues is transparent and refreshing. And he goes on to say that West Midlands Police have excellent leadership in place and he's confident in their ability. So I've already highlighted that the West Midlands Police Firearms Unit is one of the busiest in the country, and every day dedicated officers and staff come to work to keep the public safe and to perform their duties with the utmost professionalism. They are disgusted at the conduct which falls below these standards, and they are determined to achieve the same high standards and professionalism across every team in the firearms unit as they do operationally. Operation Alma provides the oversight and the scrutiny and will continue to ensure the sustained progress of this work. And as I've said, good strides have been made, but we still need to do more. I am committed to ensuring that this work is delivered locally, regionally and nationally with the national team. And I have the full backing of the chief, the executive team, but most importantly, the operations department and the firearms operations unit. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Constable. Comments, questions on matters arising? Yes, Assistant Police and Crime Commissioner Thomas Dean.
Thanks, Commissioner. I've just got a few questions. Feel free to interrupt me if I'm too long. It's kind of you come back. Yeah. So these are all genuine questions, as in I don't feel like I've got the answer to them. They're not kind of strategic in that sense. So my first one is, what sense do you get, both externally and internally, that some of this work designed to try and improve the culture is seen as kind of being woke or somehow interfering with just getting on with the proper job of policing? Do you get that sense much? And if so, what's your plan around that?
Well, I think it depends on your interpretation of what woke is. My view is we need to provide the best quality of service to every member of the community within the West Midlands Police. If that's woke, then I'm woke, would be my view. Whether it's seen as woke or not, I think is almost irrelevant. My view is we need to improve the service, the standards and behaviours of every police officer within the West Midlands Police. And particularly within my portfolio, it is clear that nationally and academically there is a challenge in relation to the standards of professional behaviour. And I think we're doing some great work in improving that. Whether or not it's labelled as woke or not, I think is a matter for the press.
Rephrase slightly then. That's perfectly fair enough what you're saying. Are you getting much resistance, I guess, internally and externally, or is it kind of seen as this is common sense, that this is the right thing to do?
I think it's probably fair to say that there's been limited resistance, but where there has been resistance, it's been dealt with pretty robustly. Without going down an academic rabbit hole, there's a concept called Lewin's force field analysis, which talks about individuals or artifacts or issues within the department or culture that will actively push back in relation to cultural change. And we are incorporating that within our action plan to ensure that we're not passive in the work that we're doing, and we are proactive in pushing into that space. So where there is pushback, either from individuals internally or externally, I think we're very clear on our position and our standards, and I think we need to hold the line in that respect.
And then previously, when this, because obviously the issue of cultural issues, before some of the stuff came out about firearms, I mean, this has been, you know, resurfacing at many board meetings, I'm sure ones you've been at as well. One of the issues that's given before is particularly in relation to firearms, but not just firearms, that the work can be so stressful and intense. And, you know, mental health and PTSD can be interwoven with some of these issues, but there's kind of a camaraderie which can mean that professional boundaries and barriers are harder to maintain. Now, that wasn't ever brought up as an excuse, just an explanation for the complexity of why some of these cultures emerge. How seriously are we engaging with those kind of dynamics, and why are we confident that they'll work? Because it's one thing identifying it and knowing it and believing it. How do you actually get past that?
I think there's a couple of things I would say on that. I think we need to be cautious, I think, of labelling police culture as ultimately negative. I think police culture is flexible, it's robust, it's protective, it's team orientated, but there are elements along the fringes where that can create some negative behaviours and standards. Do I think it's something that we're going to resolve in the next few weeks, months, years? Possibly not, but I think this is something. I remember standing in Coventry post-murder, talking about Jaden James, and said we have to do more and we have to do better. And I think we're going to continue to strive to identify individuals, teams, issues, artifacts that are undermining the standards of professional behaviour that we would expect and that our communities would expect. But it's going to take a long time, but we need to keep working at it. I don't know whether I've answered your question or not, but I don't think it's a straightforward thing. It's not a binary issue. This is a societal cultural challenge in policing nationally, which has been identified in KC, and it's been identified by Liverpool John Moores University, and it's been identified by our independent cultural audit. So this is work that's going to take time, but I'm confident that we have the right leadership in place to drive it.
Just to give a flavour of what tangible things are doing, can you just give one example of a tangible activity you're doing around that issue that gives you confidence
Yes.
that change can happen?
So an example is within our armed response vehicle teams, we have 5 teams, and historically every single inspector was an AFO, an authorised firearms officer. That's been challenged as a position that says, do we need somebody who can fire a gun or somebody who's a strong leader? I think our position is we need strong leadership. We don't need necessarily somebody who knows how to fire a gun. So we need our AFOs, our teams, to be able to deploy to high threat environments and be technically capable, but we need the leaders to be strong leaders. And the work that we've done is we've tried bringing in non-AFO leaders within the department. And I think it's shone a light on maybe some of our gaps and some of our areas of business where we can improve our leadership and understanding of well-being, workforce, performance, etc. So there's a tangible example of something we've done which is different and which nationally they're very interested in exploring with us.
Can I just respond, Commissioner, with giving, so what difference does that make though? So I would suggest that lots of our performance data for our armed officers 12 months ago would have shown some of the culture that you described, which is we're really important, we're really special, and we're in a kind of closed group because you'll need us when you need us to point guns at people. Under Sarah's leadership now, our armed officers every day, when they're not performing their role under a firearms authority, are out in communities, and the performance data alone shows that they're arresting people, they're attending domestic abuse incidents, they're stopping and searching criminals, they're using the totality of their policing powers away from their specialist core role. Of course, if a firearms incident comes in, then they go to that straight away, but actually under Sarah's leadership, it's reminded them that actually your role first and foremost for all of us is we are constables in the West Midlands Police to serve all of the public. And that actually changes the culture as well, because it reminds them, yes, you've got some specialist skills, but first and foremost, you're a police officer. And Sarah and her command team are driving that forward.
And I think, as you touched on, around the maintaining the boundaries in an environment where you have the same skill set as the officers that you're that you lead. And as ACCR has said around the focus on leadership, is if you have an inspector, a sergeant that does the same skill set as a police constable, for example, that boundary can be hard to keep, and therefore that's why the focus has been on leadership in particular for our sergeants and our inspectors. And we do know that our staff go to some of the most traumatic incidents that the force has, and they're exposed to the trauma, and they say visibly the impact that weapons, knives and firearms have on communities. And that's why we're very much focused on bringing operations resources closer to community. So you'll find our firearms officers in community events, taking part in youth groups, cadet unit, but also, as the Deputy Chief Constable has said, our focus on performance, because actually promoting and being in places where the greatest threat to the harm is, and searching individuals or conducting warrants and arresting people prevents the exposure to that really traumatic outcome actually if we don't do that. So what we try and correlate is the leadership and the values into closer to communities, and therefore driving that community activity to try and prevent those high trauma incidents and that exposure. So we try and link all of that together.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move to Kath Allen and then Linda and then Jonathan. So Kath.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I read the tribunal report because it's available on the internet, and I was really disappointed to recognise that there was behaviours there that I once saw in the 1980s. Now, although that might date me, it also dates, you know, the progression or not of where West Midlands have developed. So, how do you know what you're doing is making any difference? What's your feedback mechanisms from female officers and staff working in the firearms unit, so that you can kind of check that that what you're doing is effective? And also, what's in place to ensure that the changes that you're making actually make a difference? So that's probably part of the same question. And then the last question is, how do you know those behaviours haven't seeped out into other parts of the organisations, and what's been done in decades that those behaviours don't exist somewhere else in the organisation?
Thanks, Callum. So the first bit, I think, was about feedback from staff around checking whether or not those behaviours are still in existence. So as part of Operation Alma, there is quite a comprehensive action plan where I hold Sarah and the broader team to account in relation to not only making change, but making those changes sustainable and checking and seeking that feedback from officers and staff. So Sarah could probably brief you in relation to some of the forums and the opportunities where staff can confidentially provide that feedback, whether from an ethnic minority group or in relation to female officers, for example. But it also relates to the cultural audit and consistently checking those three elements of the environment, our espoused values, and then the underlying values. So the cultural audit, whilst it was a moment in time, it's something we're going to have to keep going back to check that there is sustained progress being made. So it's not something we can just do a point in time, great, we've done it. We need to keep going back to check it. So I'll probably bring Sarah in at that point. Sarah, is there anything else in relation to checks and balances?
In terms of feedback for female officers and staff, I think what we found at the very start was actually the staff, if they'd got the right kit and equipment, they said, yes, we have. But then you go, actually, is it right? Because actually the uniform equipment that officers get is of good quality. So actually they said, yes, it is. But actually when you go into the detail, if there's anything to change about it, what would it be? So building the trust, I think, in relationships between the leadership and the team is very important in this space. Creating a safe environment where they can raise their concerns, but they feel they can have that open and honest with leaders. So we have a people advocates group, so in the totality of operations, because farms is one part of the operations, you've got other specialist functions where, again, uniform and equipment and the voice of female staff is very important. So we have a people advocates board, we have a female officers group in operations. We also heavily engage with staff associations and networks as well. Again, giving staff the opportunity to, if they don't want to raise it with ourselves, others, who they trust to raise their concerns. So we know now that we regularly speak to our female staff, and this is about having the choice. We know around uniform equipment, the choice nationally and internationally is not there. So some manufacturers will only make unisex equipment, for example. what we want is to have a choice. So we've heavily invested, and with the support of the full executive team, bought individual pieces of equipment, both in female sizes, unisex sizes and male sizes, to give everybody a choice to find the right piece of equipment for them. So in terms of the feedback mechanisms, we have a number of groups and forums, briefings in place for our female staff, not only farms, but the broader operations. In terms of how we feel that we've made the difference and the change, I think the visibility of the leadership in the farms units and the briefings to staff and the feedback they get from staff is really important. Our performance data is also very important. We've seen it as the Chief Constable has said, we've seen a change in the performance of actually, we're not just farms officers, we're police officers, and actually we are proactive, we can support communities, we can support our care colleagues. They have had such positive feedback of going into community events, into schools, and the positive feedback they get from communities and the influence that they have with young people, I think has inspired them. The positive results they've had around the performance, again, I think has inspired them. So again, we'll look at our performance data. We'll also look at our people data, as Mr. O'Hara said. We'll do a workforce health check, so we'll look at our professional standards data, we'll look at our attendance data to understand actually the health of the unit is good and identify any trends. In terms of how do we know if that behaviour seeped into the organisation, so I work with my peers, we work as a force under POD and the diversity inclusion team. I've been very open around the journey we've had within the firearms unit with my peers as in senior leaders to share the work that we've done, and ultimately that is reciprocated. So the support we've had from Dr. Darren Rath and his team, not only around the academic work and that social identity and the basis of our cultural assessments, and understanding the principles of in-groups and out-groups, we can share that learning across not just our organisation but nationally, to understand it and then identify if it has if you have those culture areas in the organisation. I say we've been very open and shared what we've done and how we've done it, and also what we've learned, and I think that's really important. But as the boss has said, this is a continual journey for us, and we will keep doing this and we will keep doing it until we are the best that we can possibly be.
And have you seen any changes elsewhere? Could you give us an example of a change in the organisation that you've seen since this work has?
Within residents, please.
Yes.
I can give you two actually. So I think one of the key learning points is our approach to the cultural audit. Not only are we sharing nationally with the NPCC and other firearms units nationally, but I know that ROCU and our dogs unit and other areas of business are using the same methodology now to review behaviours, standards, the environment, with a view of trying to make changes moving forward. But I think Sarah's right. The point around how do we know we're making a difference? Increased representation, retention, decrease complaints, increased performance, decreased sickness. I think we need to continue to monitor those over time as we work through this action plan.
And we've had more officers than ever apply to be a firearms officer, which I think is really important. We know that our student officer cohorts are more diverse. We want to encourage people to have a career in operations and armed policing. So we do a lot more engagement with our student officer cohorts out in our communities, because we want to inspire people to be our firearms officers of the future, because we know our workforce is getting more diverse, whether that be around age or gender. We've seen more people apply to be firearms officers in our latest round of recruitment than we have before.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Opinda, you're next.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, very quickly, I'm just going to home in on paragraph 29. I know West Mid is a very, very big area. It's difficult, but, and I'm going to home in on Wolverhampton and say, where is this taking place? You say you go to places. I can't see no engagement. I cannot see an engagement, and I've been saying this for years and years and years, and I just cannot see it. I mean, for me, you just said you go to schools, you go to community centres. Yes, that was happening. But for crying out loud, if you go to a big event like the Saki procession, you've got over 20,000 people there. You've got kids from colleges, university schools, community centres. Simple stuff, community engagement. You cannot go wrong. I mean, either I'm walking around with my eyes closed or I'm missing something. But please, why are we not doing this?
So the first thing I would say is we can always do more. There's no doubt we can always do more. I went to Handsworth Park only during the summer and stood with some firearms officers liaising with the community. I take the point that you're working from Wolverhampton, therefore you want to understand what's going on in the Black Country. I'm more than happy, subsequent to the report, subsequent to this session, to give you a briefing in relation to specific events that we have been at and all that are planned for the rest of the year. But I don't think you've got any other specifics.
Yeah,
you'd like to add.
we go to more events than we've done before. I'm happy to have a conversation with you afterwards around Wolverhampton if you feel actually there's certain places and events, more than happy to have the discussion. Handsworth Community Day was a fantastic day actually, where the questions that we had from lots of young people to our farms officers, there was a queue of people waiting for them that stayed after, because actually they know that they've got the tools for engagement. They know that actually, whether it be the cars or their equipment, they know that they can inspire a conversation, and every interaction we have with the community member is important, leaves a lasting impression. So for me, that's where we want to bring ourselves closer. So I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you afterwards around Wolverhampton in particular.
Thank you, Bhupinder. I'm going to pass to Jonathan, Chief Executive, and then I'll bring in Charmaine.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. Lots here. Just as a preamble, I'm very grateful to Mike for the work on this report. I think that it's a very useful and wide-ranging, and it covers what was a very detailed spec for information. I know that you've taken time out from a course that you're on as well. I'm very grateful for that. And of course, it is a role in policing that I think the public has a great deal of respect for, understandably. But there is that wider context here that's key. I suppose as an observation at the outset, it strikes me that the most challenging aspect of the paper, and again, I think it's interesting using the approach of Ed Shine to kind of inform the discussion about culture. And it's what's understanding, what's the mechanism, what's the theory of change that moves you from the espoused values to the underlying values. What is it that, you know, you've talked a lot about changes to training, changes to practice, changes to policy, changes that are about espoused values. How do you turn that into the underlying change that I think is implicit in what the report, explicit indeed in what the report is, and the work that Alma's doing in trying to achieve. So there's kind of a question there about, I guess, hidden away somewhere, about what is the theory of change from espoused values to the underlying culture. But looking at perhaps more some more practical areas. At the heart of the operational practice is this issue of courses, overtime and promotion, which really do sit at the centre of some of the concerns that have been raised about the fairness and equity of processes, those core processes. And I guess I would say, so what examples in those areas of assignment training and courses, the allocation of overtime and selection and support for promotion, what's changed? I mean, it's a question that's coming up from others as well. So what's changed there? And then there's lots, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Jamie, go for it.
Sorry. And then secondly, at Para 70, a key issue that came up both in Casey and I think has also come up elsewhere around rotas and partnering arrangements. It talks about, the report talks about those, the rotas and partnering being set by sergeants in the FOU. And in some of the negative case studies that have come up both here and, as you say, at CNC and elsewhere. And I would note, of course, actually Simon Chesterton, the Chief Constable who leads for this portfolio area, was actually keen to attend today, but wasn't able to do so. So it's worth noting the level of interest there is in the work that's being done here. But at Para 70, it talks about the risks around, or the approach to rotas and partnering. Is the oversight right there? Are we sure that there aren't kind of punishment postings or postings that are favouring some officers over others, just to make sure that issue is being addressed? And then I know there's been a lot in there about equipment. I noticed, of course, the Chief Superintendent's comments on relation to equipment. I guess the assurance that the Commissioner and the Board would want essentially is, if you have an individual who meets the requirements to become an authorised firearms officer or advance into other specialisms, is there going to be the right kit available, or is it going to be them adapting to kit that's available? Is the right kit there for somebody who meets standards that are set? And then next up, while noting the inclusion of non-AFO officers, as frontline leaders, both at sergeant and inspector role. There will, of course, still be individuals, officers who are promoted from inside the unit into sergeant and inspector roles. What kind of training, support, environment is created for those individuals so that they are adjusting, as has been talked about, from being at the constable rank into that frontline leadership role inside the FOU? And then I guess lastly, just try and flesh out a bit more around the integration with local policing. What sort of, how are you ensuring that's being maintained as an operational practice, that there is this rota into local policing for sergeants, but there is still a responsiveness from the FOU to tasking inside local policing? So I think that's one of the key areas for change in culture, and I'm really keen to understand how that will be developed. So quite a lot there. Apologies for lots of questions. Commissioner did tell me I asked lots of questions, so there you are.
I think there are 5 core bits there, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So I'll come back on all of them, and then I'll ask Sarah to plug any gaps if that's okay. Cultural change. Yeah. Within the action plan, we are cognizant of a number of cultural change models and approaches. I'm particularly taken by Lewin's force field analysis in relation to the pushback around equilibrium. So I'm more than happy maybe outside to show you our action plan and maybe look at some of those cultural change models and approaches. The challenge around cultural change is there's a lot of academic research out there. There's a lot around policing and sort of militaristic cultures. And what we try to do is take elements of each and try and, I know it's not a professional word, smoosh them together into one action plan, which gives us a bit of a sustainable approach moving forward. So that was the first thing. The second thing, you were talking about fairness and equity almost in relation to promotion opportunities, workforce strategy moves, etc. I think what we have done is we've almost taken a lot of the core processes out of the hands of FOU direct and moved them into the operations SLT. And Sarah will allude to some of that around how we deal with workforce strategy, the fact that that is overseen by a superintendent for operations, not just within the FOU, which provides a slightly more independent eye and reassures not only Sarah as the chief superintendent, but also me as the portfolio lead, that there is a broader review and understanding around moves, etc. And you specifically referenced paragraph 70 in relation to the postings, etc. I think the important thing there is it's visible and it's in advance. So Lisa Edwards, as the head of department, is very clear that she understands that what we don't have is the same individuals always buddied up with each other and or punishment postings, as you refer to them. So there is visibility and planning, and it's on a system where I think historically firearms rostering has been quite challenging with my time, and it's been done on spreadsheets and Excel, which is maybe somewhat less visible to the organisation. So I think that in and of itself will help moving forward. You've referenced uniform and equipment. Again, what we've done is we've lifted that out of FOU up. So, and we've brought in Ian Kent and the uniform equipment team into this area of business. So historically, what would have happened is either a specialist or an individual within FOU who understood a particular tactic, whether it be method of entry, motorbike, explosive, method of entry, etc. These individuals understood the kit and equipment requirements and would just go and get it. What we're now saying is you need to come through our corporate uniform and equipment processes to ensure that there isn't any sort of favourable items and or a lack of control around budget. And I know Sarah will touch on that. You've referenced leadership training or leadership support for the sergeants and inspectors. I think the rotation piece is actually quite important. But I also think really the focus more than anything on leadership skills rather than technical ability has been very important. What we have found, being candid, is there's been maybe quite a gap, I think, around knowledge and understanding, perhaps around PDR discussions, well-being, referrals, return to work interviews, which if you're in a core area of business in policing, which most supervisors and inspectors would know those pretty well. But I think because some of our leaders within the FOU have grown up through the FOU, I think they've missed some of those opportunities to be developed in those skill sets. And then finally, reference local policing. I think that's where I and the DEP come into play through performance monitoring. And I think when I know Sarah through her performance meeting on behalf of operations track and monitor the non-firearms related incidents that firearms officers are involved in. That is very important and a strong indicator of the connection to local policing. And interestingly, there are a number of individuals who are on the ARVs who do overtime on local policing, which I don't think we would have ever seen before. And I've actually heard them say that local policing is the heart of what we deliver. And you can already sense a little bit of a shift from some of our newer in-service ARVs as they understand the importance of local policing and working closely with the community. So I think those are some of the key bits. But Sarah, are there any gaps there you plug?
No, I think that what we're talking about is the fairness of opportunity and the transparency of decision making. So allocation of courses or training. It's the transparency of the decision making. So we have a new process around course allocation. We have changed our teams. So we've changed our ARV teams. We've looked at role profiles, skill sets, length of time in the department, and we've rearranged our ARV teams. And then we've been very fortunate. We've gone through a period of time where we've done a lot of recruitment, got a lot of new staff into our ARV teams. Therefore, they require additional training. That training is done in a open and transparent way, and the decision making is shared across the teams in terms of the allocation and fairness of opportunity. In terms of the rotas, the partnerships, and also the integration into local policing, in operations now we have the role of the force incident manager, who's the chief inspector, who works 24/7. One of their key roles is around the leadership of the operations resources. So they understand through our weekly tasking meeting the tasks assigned to all of the operations resources, including our firearms units, and they ensure that those tasks are completed and the feedback obtained from local policing areas. But as the boss has said, it's in our performance data, it's the feedback from our LPA colleagues, and it's our staff's greater understanding of force priorities and what matters to communities as well, from our feedback of speaking to them. In terms of uniform equipment, I'd probably just add on that is we are assured we've got the right kit available for our staff now. We are trying to broaden the choice and that work. I chair the national tactical group on policing, and one of the priorities for that group is uniform and equipment. So we link into the national uniform and equipment user group, but the priority of our group is to look through the lens of diversity. So not just looking at those big ticket items, but actually influencing manufacturers' designs through the lens of diversity to give people the choice. So that's why locally we have the reassurance by procuring a range of equipment, but actually influencing nationally through Blue Light Commercial to ensure actually influencing manufacturers to provide a broader range of sizes and for the equipment. And just finally, in terms of promotion, the rotation of our staff into local policing areas has proved beneficial for ourselves and for local policing areas, because we have to look at that transfer of skill. We can share what resources are available from an operations perspective and how we could add value, and likewise our staff gain that greater understanding of what matters on local policing areas, and what the boss has kind of said, that our staff are far more involved in local policing responsibilities as well as their firearms duties. Because they know that they're there to support and work in partnership with their LPA colleagues to ensure that their community of the LPA is kept safe. So they do the broad range of activities now more than they've ever done before.
Thank you. Going to pass to Charmaine next. I think that will have to be probably the final contribution in due time. Charmaine.
Firstly, you've put in your table here, 26, it talks about BAME. That doesn't really give us a clear kind of breakdown of who is in this BAME group and, separate. And, we've mentioned this before in these meetings that, BAME, can you break that down so you can be more specific? We can see really what's going on in terms of the different ethnicities there. So that's one point. And secondly, I want to talk about your recruitment of women and how you're actually now promoting and recruiting women and reassuring women, not just the ones in the force that can progress into those areas, but those who are potentially outside the force, how are you reassuring them practically and visibly that the force is a place where they can come in, feel safe, have a healthy working environment, and that the issues that have been widely in the media have deceased and they will be able to have a flourishing career? How have you promoted that outside of the force as well?
So in terms of the breakdown of the BAME, I'll provide you with that afterwards, in terms of the breakdown of our BAME officers. In relation to female recruitment inside and outside, it's something I'm really passionate about. You know, so I was a PC in operations many years ago, and I was probably one of the only female officers, so I know what it's like. For me, I represent female officers. They should look and see me, and I should set a really good example to inspire them to join our force and to join operations. At our recent Excellence Awards, I sat with the Cadets of the Year. I was a police cadet. It matters, it's important. So for me, we do events with cadets. We have on International Women's Day, we invited Boards of the Green female cadets units to us to open up the doors of operations. So this is around sharing what we do. Now, we know with female recruitment, particularly in the operations space, we understand some of the barriers, and this is not just West Midlands Police, but nationally, particularly one of those could be around fitness. So what we're trying to do is taking fitness as an example, is share and open up what the fitness test is. We provide reassurance that fitness test is the right level, and that's a lot of work done through the College of Policing. And then working with our health and fitness advisors outside of operations, give staff the opportunity, whether they apply for a role in operations or not, the chance to experience that fitness test, to observe it, to have a go at it under no pressure, to break down some of those barriers. We go on to briefings of our teams internally. And as I've said before, we go to IAGs, we go out to schools, and we open ask questions. So for me, we want to encourage female officers to join our organisation, but for me, we want to encourage more female officers into operations roles, because nationally within armed policing, we want to encourage more female armed officers. Now, we know that for some people, a career in armed policing is just not, they don't want to carry a firearm, and that's absolutely okay, but actually, we want everyone to feel like they can have a career in firearms in particular. We have a lot of people on flexible working, male and female. We know that with lots of people now have caring responsibilities, not for children, but for families and parents. So we're very open in terms of our flexibility that we offer. We're very open around as what can be the barriers, and working through our staff association network, so Women in Police in particular. We try and understand any barriers that are shared, and we try and put on events, briefings, invite them to the unit, and to see and explore, for them to make that informed choice if a career within armed policing in particular is something that they would want to progress, and we help and support them as much as possible in relation to if they choose that career pathway.
Would you answer the question if I was to say that you were put in post as a woman to combat some of the negative media that came from women who had grievances? And then also, how would you answer the question around, well, I don't want to because I've seen all the negative and I don't work in the police. I haven't seen anything that you guys have put out there. I'm still really kind of like quite scared that if I was to come into that environment, that could happen to me. What are you doing to combat or answer those questions?
If I could just come in on that point, if that's okay. So I think that's a really fair challenge. I think we've got some myth busting to do, but I think it's clear that some of the press attention over the last 12 months has been hugely damaging for us as a department and as a force. And I think Operation Armour and the work that we're briefing you on at the moment is part of that, but only part of that. I think we probably need to up the ante a little bit more around our comms and engagement piece. So myth busting, because, you know, we've talked about there's a concern around a lack of flexibility, a concern around fitness levels, a concern around the culture, the macho culture within firearms. This is something that we've seen nationally. And I think the cultural audit, Operation Armour, and the work that we are progressing is part of that. But I think we need to up the ante around comms and engagement to try and provide additional reassurance. But I think it's probably fair to say that the negative press that we've received over the last 6 to 12 months has been very damaging. So this is, again, as I've said before, I don't think this is a short-term response. I think we're going to have to keep working at this. I think it's the same in trust and confidence broader in policing anyway, is it's the 2 steps forward, you know, 1 step back consistently. And I feel like we've probably taken a step back around a bit of a reduction in the trust and confidence, particularly around firearms culture. But I'm really confident that the work that's been done and led through the operations SLT and with our chief and our broader exec, we can absolutely nail it, but we've got some work to do.
Commissioner, I realise we're pressed for time, but I just want to answer the first bit of that. So Sarah was in the post that she's in now when I arrived here, but the chief super served where the chief decides based on my recommendation. As we sit here today, we have not got, in my view, enough female chief superintendents. One of our chief superintendents is one of our 7 LPA commanders. And one of the reasons for that is because we want the public to not be looking at lots of the faces of middle-aged white men, which is the makeup of the remainder of our other 6 LPA commanders. Sarah is in her post for, in my view, 3 reasons. The first one is because she's an exemplary leader in a really, really tricky environment, which has got some cultural challenges as well as some operational challenges. The second and really important reason is because she has the experience as a woman in policing that none of our male chief supers have. But the third one, which is just as important, is we have a handful of specialist strategic firearms commanders, of which the 3 of us are all of them. I don't say this as a badge of honour. It is the hardest policing assessment I've ever done in 28 years. Sarah is one of our only chief superintendents, is also qualified at that level. So she's also involved because she's immensely professionally qualified to lead what is a really, really difficult operational command to hold. Lots of our other chief supers simply not qualified to do it. And quite frankly, I'm really proud of the fact that we've got a female leader that, 1, is able to take on that cultural challenge, 2, immensely professionally qualified. But as Sarah has already acknowledged herself, it's also leading some of the work nationally, the way that we care for women in our policing is equal.
Finally, that should go. Few comments.
Thanks, Charmaine. In view of time, we're going to have to bring this agenda item to a conclusion, but thank you both very much for attending and presenting that report and for answering our questions. It's much appreciated. The primary purpose of the paper was to provide assurance to myself as Police and Crime Commissioner, my board, and to the wider public that the Firearms Operations Unit is acting in accordance with the law and not engaging in unlawful discrimination. And that's essential because without that assurance, it will not be possible to deliver on the fundamental principle that this must always be by consent. It will undermine public trust and confidence in the unit, and it will not be possible to ensure an effective and efficient police service. The paper, however, also provides an insight into the immensely challenging and difficult circumstances in which firearms officers operate. They can be called upon to make decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. They volunteer to take on the weighty responsibility that comes with being a firearms officer, and it's important to acknowledge and understand that. We're grateful for the work that they do. However, it is essential the unit is acting in accordance with the law and not engaging in unlawful discrimination. That's because, firstly, self-evidently, policing must be in accordance with the law and the highest standards of professional conduct. Secondly, failure to comply with the law is expensive, both financially and in terms of damage to reputation and the serious harm that is caused to the victims of unlawful discrimination. Thirdly, it's necessary to maintain the trust and confidence of the public. And finally, because we need a unit that is made up of the brightest and the best and the most capable officers. And that must mean ensuring it is open, diverse, inclusive and welcoming to all that have the ability to serve as firearms officers. It's clear from the paper that action has been taken and is being taken to ensure that the unit acts in accordance with the law and eliminates any and all unlawful discrimination. However, I will continue to hold the Chief Constable to account to ensure that unlawful discrimination will not be tolerated within the Firearms Operations Unit or in any other area of policing. Agenda item 6 is Environmental Strategy Update. And this agenda item is to be presented by Zane Ahmed, Environment and Sustainability Manager. And in view of time, Zane, if you could present for about 5 minutes or so. Oh, sorry. Forgive me. If you could present for about 3 minutes or so.
Okay.
And then we'll have an opportunity for answering questions and making any comments if that's okay. Thank you, Zane.
Wonderful. So what I'll quickly do is go through the key points of this paper and open the floor for any questions. So just to note, this is West Midlands Police First Environmental Strategy. This was done alongside the government's net zero strategy, which is to build back greener. Within our strategy, we've got a number of key strategic points that we're looking to deliver. And one of them was to reduce West Midlands Police carbon footprint. As part of that, the PCC commissioned a carbon trust report, and we were going to get a greenhouse gas emissions report. This will give WMP the chance to have a clear benchmark against which to demonstrate carbon reduction. Currently, the work is in progress, and we're hoping to get it in the back end of November. I appreciate we are on the 28th of November, but we're still waiting to get that report back. Following on from this, an assessment of carbon reduction opportunities will be carried out, and a net zero roadmap will be produced by the Carbon Trust. This we're anticipating to get January 2024. So with that in mind, we'll be able to look into how we could bring West Midlands Police as a greener police force. We have also identified an initiative through Investors in the Environment, IIE. Part of this is to promote sustainable practices. IIE are in the process of being commissioned and will begin work in early December. So initial conversations suggest we will gain bronze accreditation within this financial year, and silver is our next target. We will achieve this by having measurable targets to show that we are becoming more environmentally aware and responsible. In order to promote the environmental strategy and raise awareness, we are working with corporate comms to start a new strategy beginning of the year, where we're asking everyone to make environmental pledges and have a week-long campaign and see how we are getting in terms of people's responses. One of the targets that was also identified within our report was to reduce fleet emissions. So additional EV vehicles will be procured, and alongside that, we will also be looking at increasing the amount of EV charging we have on sites. So currently CAMS is doing the scoping for that, and we will make sure there are suitable reserves of electricity prior to our fleet going towards a more electronically based solution. As vehicle manufacturers increase their models and ranges, it is anticipated an additional 5% of the fleet will be going towards EV. So those are the summary from this report. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for that. The first thing I wanted to say was just well done for kind of managing to progress the work in kind of really fully assessing what WMP CO2 emissions are. And I think that's really good, because I know that was always a commitment, and I was just worried because it was difficult and it might involve time and money that it would never happen. So it's brilliant that that's done. So without that, we can't progress. So fantastic. And then my other question, really, it's kind of a basic big picture question, but there's a lot in your report. You've already alluded to some of the potential solutions to how we reduce our emissions. Given that, you know, it's going to take some time and there's lots of different little bits of behavioural change, what are the couple of big wins? What are the couple of actions that will really make a serious dent in this?
I think one of the biggest events that we can make is changing our EV fleet and looking at our estate and going towards more sustainable technologies and solutions where possible. So that's something we're actively looking into. The carbon report that's being produced by the Carbon Trust, that will give us a net zero roadmap. So we will be using that roadmap to see how we could bring reductions in place and make positive changes to try and tackle the issue that we've got at the moment.
So, and taking from that, I mean, I know you've still got to get the report,
Yeah.
So the full details and real assurance will come through that process. But so cars and vehicles will be one of the main ways.
Yes.
Is there any other kind of like really big ticket items? And I guess the reason I'm asking that is if I'm out in public meetings or whatever, and I'm trying to give them assurance as a plan, I just want to give them a nod to try and understand what the key opportunities are. So vehicles and
yeah, so also the estate we've got as well. So we're looking at any renewable sources, how we could implement LED lighting, for example, BMS, which is networking solutions, and solar panels were applicable. So we're just going to monitor everything alongside the PCC's
estate strategy and see where we can implement these and try and make our changes.
If I may sort of add as well, Commissioner, and thank you, Zain. So it's really important for us to ensure that we kind of deliver, as Zain said, that first big step is really understanding the baseline. What I'm very keen to do is you'll see from Zain's report that a number of pieces of work are kind of culminating in kind of us having additional information kind of either in December or early in the calendar year. What we'd like to do is bring a further update back to the board, really sort of setting out that once we have those clearly established baselines, what the further plans that we would take forward, particularly from the fleet perspective and from the estates perspective, because they are the two big areas that we would really wish to hear. You'll recall when we sort of brought the estate strategy to the board a month ago, you know, we said that we felt that the kind of the delivery of the estate strategy very much is a key contributor to this, and have tried to shape that estate strategy based on kind of these forthcoming baselines and so on. So really happy to bring that further update of the work that Zain and the team will be doing kind of in the new calendar year. That's how the Commission.
Commissioner, if I can just add as well. We wanted to bring the report today just to make sure that, because it's such a vital part of the future, to just be clear and transparent with the board about the work that's still underway. But exactly as you asked, Neil, you know, we need to get to a plan for the plan first, and then we'll develop the plan. So this is a long staging post on the way to getting there. And in terms of what needs to be covered in it, it won't just be estate, it won't just be fleet, it won't just be choice of fuel for fleet. It will be building methods around estates. It will even be treasury management, because actually, if you're not investing in the correct vehicles, then you cannot be clear and sure that you have environmental and social factors in your treasury management strategy. So it has tendrils out into absolutely everything. But what we need to do is to establish, you know, do we understand all of that? And then can we set reasonable targets for delivering against each of those areas?
Thank you. Going to bring in Bapinda and then we'll probably need to bring this item to a conclusion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a very silly question, and I don't think you'll take it out. Now, we look at paragraph 16, it talks about a lot of work, which I think everybody's committed to. Solar panels and LED lighting and one thing and another. It's a lot of work, a lot of expenses.
Yeah.
And then when we go to paragraph 23, we look at the government commitment.
Yeah.
And we look at 1.425 billion, and then further down 230 million.
Yeah.
The question I'm going to put to you is this money going to be fairly contributed across the country, or like the government gives funding, and obviously West Mid is the fifth worst, you know, we get a fifth worst settlement. Are we going to see the same scenario here, or will it be fairly distributed?
So answer that. I don't think we can comment on that, but how the government distribute their money, that's not for us to comment on. We West Midlands Public Carbon Review on how Her Majesty's government allocate funding.
But surely, if there's money there and it's going to be distributed, is it going to be distributed fairly?
It's not a matter that we can comment on. We can't comment on how government distribute funding. The Commissioner can, but we can't.
Commissioner, can you help me?
Not a matter about which I can give you an answer in relation to this specific funding that you've identified at paragraph 23 of this paper, Bapinda. Something to look into.
Okay.
But on past performance, I think you probably know the answer. Kath, you're next.
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoyed reading your report. It gave like a real flavour of what you were doing. Paragraph 11 talks about investors in the environment and West Midlands aiming for a bronze and silver accreditation.
Yeah.
I think it must be a gold one out there as well. What would West Midlands need to do to achieve a gold as opposed to a silver? Because there's no clarity on what the gap is between the threats.
So it comes down to the accuracy of reporting. So the more accurate our reporting is and how we are calculating our emissions, that increases the level of accreditation.
So what we don't want to do is go for gold straight away when we know there are some inaccuracies in our reporting. So we're going to work alongside investors in the environment, get to silver, and then see what additional steps are required to go to the next level.
Do you do any partnership work with other public service organisations or other agencies who are facing similar challenges regarding their environmental process?
Yes, we do. So we have meetings with national police forces as well as fire services as well. And I can tell you, everyone has similar problems, but we're all working together to come to the same solution. So, yeah.
And then the final question, Peter, is probably for you. So the transported choice of criminals is not going to be electric cars. So how can you assure us that the fleet will have adequate vehicles that can kind of match what criminals are doing in pursuit of other types of police response that are required?
This is very kind of, it's one of the issues that's being discussed nationally, actually, Kath, and we absolutely recognise that the fleet will require a real mixed economy of kind of different types of response vehicles, depending on the circumstances, and we know that will flex and change over the coming years. So we will have to maintain a certain kind of approach, whilst also decarbonising and electrifying certain elements of the fleet. We recognise that we will have to ourselves have an appropriate response. It's absolutely something I know the National Fleet Managers group are working on as well in terms of making recommendations.
Thank you. I've just got three very quick points. The first is in relation to paragraph 11, and as Kath mentioned about the various gold, silver, bronze accreditations that can be obtained. Are we optimistic that we will obtain bronze within this financial year?
Yes, we are. So we're going to do work next week.
Thank you, that's much appreciated. At paragraph 14, around the sustainable environmental initiatives fund, could you give me an example of what sort of initiatives that fund might be potentially funding?
Sure. So this is specific for any environmental schemes. So it's all together within its own entity. So we're looking at trials of waste disposal, so hard recycling items such as PPE or the plastic from tasers. We're looking at local initiatives, so working with community gardens, looking at planting boxes, water butts, reusable items such as rechargeable batteries and timer lights to reduce energy consumption when stations aren't leading lights, and any mine upgrade works to the physical environment that aren't covered via regular building maintenance.
That's really helpful, appreciated. And then just my final point is in relation to financial implications of paragraph 22, when you talk about the importance of the environmental strategy providing an opportunity to identify best to save initiatives. Could you give us an example of a way in which investment in these initiatives at the moment has potentially saved some money for West Midlands Police?
So I think a lot of the reporting and what we get back from those reports will give us a good indication on how we could save money, heating our estate for vehicles, but also simple things like LED lights. A lot of our stations don't have them, so making that change and seeing how we can make those savings will be as part of the financial implications.
And Commissioner, a lot of the work that we've done with the installation of solar PV is really kind of already, you're giving those kind of ongoing savings, and further kind of emphasis on that will be.
Yeah, understood. Well, Zane, thank you so much for coming along and attending this morning and presenting your report and answering our questions. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Moving then on to agenda item 7A, complaints against West Midlands Police. I understand this agenda item is to be presented by Deputy Chief Constable Scott Green. Deputy, if you're able to spend about 5 minutes or so presenting your report on the basis we will have an opportunity to read it. It's available to members of the public and to provide an opportunity for comments, questions, matters arising. So over to you, Deputy Chief Constable.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is a report that I would have been presenting irrespective of whether the Chief was here or not, because as the board will be aware, professional standards sits within the Deputy Chief Constable's portfolio in most police forces. I'm joined today by Superintendent Sangara from our PSD department, who hopefully can answer any technical questions that the panel have got. It's worth noting then that PSD plays an important role in the maintenance of the trust and confidence that the public have on us. There have been a number of national events which have impacted on the trust and confidence that the public have in policing and in professional standards department. which include the case review and the conviction of 2 criminals who once served as police officers with the Metropolitan Police. As a result of the conviction of one of those 2 criminals that previously served within the Metropolitan Police, the NPCC undertook a national data wash, and whilst that's been reported here in the past, it's worth just re-emphasising that we were one of the first forces in the country to complete that historic data wash under Operation Affairs Day. There will be a national report published in January 24, which will give some further details of the number of returns. Suffice to say that we were very comfortable with the returns that we got, and it did not tell us many things that we didn't already know about our staff and officers as a result of either PSD investigations, intelligence, or vetting. In terms of PSD itself, it's made up of 50% police officers and 50% police staff working both full and part-time hours, which means that as a result of some of that flexibility, 70% of the department are from underrepresented groups, which gives a balance of experience and both in and out of the police service. The PSD is also supported across the force by standards managers in each of our departments and LPAs, which acts really as a spock between PSD and the rest of the force. In order to increase knowledge and awareness of PSD, we have also commenced the recruitment of standards ambassadors. So, as an example, an armed officer may well be a standards ambassador, which is a link again between that standards manager in each LPA or department and PSD, but somebody who can work together with PSD to talk about standards, about code ethics, and so on. And at their recent launch event, Superintendent Sangar went on behalf of PSD. In terms of the regulations that currently govern police complaints, those regulations are complex because they're underpinned by a number of different pieces of legislation. But changes in 2020 introduced a reflective practice review process, which is designed to tease out where there is learning and reflect on that learning at an earlier stage in the investigation. But the board will be aware that there are proposals in place from the government announced in September 2023, which will see a number of changes to the current regulations. These will include, if they go through, the removal of the role of the legal qualified chair at hearings, with those hearings to be chaired either by an ACC, the deputy, or in the chief, with a rebuttable presumption of dismissal for gross misconduct and the right of appeal to police appeal tribunals by chief constables in the event that an officer is not dismissed. In its own right, will be a difficult thing to manage, but it's in there. So since April of this year, we have received 1,967 complaints. What PSD tell me, because I spend a lot of time with them, is the number of complainants is falling, but the number of matters that they complain about is increasing, i.e. one complainant often has more things to report about. We receive about 90 complaints a week, and I will talk about our timeliness at the moment. There is a backlog of reviews requested on the IOPC by complainants. It is a national issue, it's not unique to us, but again, that can impact on the satisfaction of a complainant at the end of the process. I'll just move on to some of the broader data. So in terms of PSD and their dip sampling, there is an OPCC board, as this board will be aware, that reviews a number of cases and gives feedback to PSD. That sits alongside a monthly, quarterly performance review that I personally conduct with PSD, where I review all of the complaints and misconduct data, and included in that is the timeliness of investigations, which drives forward their accountability. There are a number of other elements within PSD that I just want to talk about, and then allow the board to ask questions, particularly about the data. So the force conducts annual integrity health checks, which is flagged up by our inspectorate body and others as a really good practice. We're at over 80% compliant again this year, which is 80% of the organisation completed their annual integrity health checks. We also got an intervention team which lead a piece of work looking at those that we might need to intervene with and have professional discussions with where they sit outside of normal complaints. In terms of those processes then, so particularly for complaints, obviously I've talked about collective practice. For misconduct matters, they will end up at a police officer meeting, which is seen a decrease. That decrease has coincided with an increase in reflective practice, which tells us that we are hopefully allowing the organisation to learn from things which don't need a sanction at the end of it. But that's balanced with police officer hearings have significantly increased this year, as have both former officer hearings and accelerated hearings. So to give you a, for instance, our use of accelerated hearings where we have strong evidence of misconduct, which is unrebuttable. We have taken those outside of criminal prosecutions, putting those officers in front of the chief constable, so that the chief constable can chair an accelerated hearing, which often means that we then have former officers going on trial for criminal matters, as opposed to a serving officer that might have been suspended for a long time, cost to the public purse, which is, in my view, is a positive step forward. In terms of the timeliness of investigations, the data is in the pack. We are just tracking that at the moment because of an increase in the number of complaints that we received. I need to be reassured that the working time to finalise investigations doesn't go too high. As you can see at the moment, we're at 138, which is far better than we were 2 years ago. We are just tracking that at the moment. The board will know on page 24, which includes data of suspensions, that the number of officers suspended from duty or staff and officers suspended has increased. There is a notable increase since April time. One of the things that happened in April time is the force got a new deputy chief constable. I'm the person who decides whether somebody gets suspended or not. There's a twofold test. The first part of the test is whether or not officer and staff member or officer in particular could interfere with the investigation. And the second thing, and probably the most important thing, is whether the presence of that officer in the workplace has an impact on the confidence that the public have on the office. And if I think that it does have an impact that the public have on them, then I'm happier to suspend them. Of course, with all of those decisions, it's the welfare consideration of the officer. There's the cost to the organisation and ultimately the public purse. We have to balance all of those in turn. We have a number of HMIC recommendations that came out of the National Vetting Misogyny and Misconduct report. We've submitted the vast majority of those for write-off now, and I'm content that we are on top of a number of our recommendations. In terms of vetting, we have just within the last month or so reviewed again the vetting process, because the feedback that PSD get from other parts of the organisation, particularly in Pete's world, that vetting and the timeliness of vetting can be a barrier to getting people into the organisation. So we've changed some of the flow of vetting, which includes an early triage of somebody so that we don't put them through lots of steps of sending data. The assessment by the vetting department within PSD is this person won't pass vetting, to try and speed some of that process up. It includes a number of reminders along the way, because we find that we get to certain points in the vetting process and realise actually they've not updated, they've not uploaded their passport. So we've reviewed the processes to try and speed that up a little bit. We've just done, led by the head of professional standards, a review of all the posts in the organisation that require management vetting, which is probably best described as everybody kind of chief inspector and above. They need an enhanced level of vetting. And then I'm happy to come to a closed board to talk about this final point. We are currently doing a review of the posts in the force that require developed vetting, which is the highest level of vetting in the UK. Clearly, the chief and the deputy are developed vetting, as are the chief officer. We're just doing a review of the number of posts that require developed vetting to make sure we are where we need to be in relation to that. The final two things that I want to touch on is our integrity unit and counter-corruption. So we have a counter-corruption unit that deals with intelligence, in particular about those officers and staffs working in the covert space. And whilst their work is not always seen, they are doing great work to root out real wrongdoing within policing. And whilst I get to spend a lot of time with them, lots of people across the force don't get to see the work they do. It's a really important part of our armoury importantly, to protect the integrity of the force, to protect the safety of our officers and staff, to root out criminality and give the public confidence. And then the final thing that we have recently introduced as a pilot, but we're likely to take that through our PBB process with a view to establishing full time, is we have now created a small integrity unit. What that unit is designed to do is where PSD give directions to somebody that they haven't, they may have said, I've got a notifiable association, somebody who knows a relative who I think might be a known criminal. PSD will give a direction, which is you can't associate them anymore, and actually you can't continue with that business interest that you have because it brings you into contact with them. We've set up an integrity unit now to specifically monitor, and when we've given that direction, are people actually complying with it, which is a step forward that lots and lots of other forces are doing. I think we're pretty unique in that. It's working really well so far. We're going to put that onto the establishment full time. So I've tried to avoid the data in there because there's lots of it. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about it. We try and pick out the themes. So with that, Commissioner, either between myself or Superintendent Sengar, should be able to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Constable. Before I open it up to the board, I've got one immediate question I wanted to put to you in connection with paragraphs 21 and 22 of the paper. Paragraph 21 sets out that in September 2023, the government announced a number of changes that would take place in relation to the 2020 regulations. And those include, for example, removal of the role of legally qualified chairs and gross misconduct hearings to be chaired by ACCs, DCCs or chief constables. I'm going to put 4 matters to you in connection with those proposed changes. Number one, to what extent are those proposed changes informed by data and are evidence led, as opposed to political expediency? Secondly, I appreciate that those proposed changes might well increase the confidence of chief constables in connection with that process, but to what extent will it improve the trust and confidence of the general public? Bearing in mind that the general public might say this is the police marking their own homework. Thirdly, to what extent, if those changes were to come about, might chief constables, for example, be subject to political pressure in a way that a legally qualified chair would not? And I have in mind the example that took place recently in Northern Ireland, where it was suggested that a chief constable engaged in unlawful decision-making as a consequence of political pressure that they were subjected to. And then finally, what about the concerns of the Police Federation in connection with these changes in relation to the concerns they have around fairness and procedural propriety?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the first and obvious thing to note is whilst this paper is in my name and PSD sits within my name, our Chief Constable was sat here now, he'd probably answer this question because he's the national lead for all these matters, which is one of the things that his conference will be talking about at the moment. So in terms of are these changes informed by data? The obvious data to refer to is since the change under the current regulations to legally qualified chairs, less police officers have been dismissed from service for gross misconduct than before. That is the most obvious piece of data. So in the olden hearings, when they were chaired by the chief officers, more police officers were dismissed from service for gross misconduct than then are under the current guise with legally qualified chairs. And of course, at the conclusion of that process now, there is no appeal mechanism for chief constables if they disagree with that decision other than judicial review. I'll answer 2 and 4 together in terms of confidence in the proposals. The honest answer is I don't know what the reaction of the public will be. I think there is a fair assumption that where an officer is found to have committed acts of gross misconduct, I think it's fair and proper for the public to ask the question, should that individual still be a serving and warranted police officer? And the current process shows that they are less likely to be dismissed in legal qualified chair than they are with chief constable. What is clear though, which is answering the fourth point, is that the Police Federation are not supportive of this proposal, either locally or nationally. They've made their voice very clear and will continue to do so, both locally to us and to the NPCC. And then the final point in relation to the political pressure. Well, as we sit here today, Chief Constables have the authority already to chair misconduct hearings for accelerated hearings. And I can only speak on my own observations. I haven't seen any evidence of it. I don't think there will be any evidence of it. But of course, these are still proposals, and if they come to place, we all need to ensure we continue to scrutinise that process and make sure we get the right outcomes through these processes for the public.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Constable. As you quite rightly allude to, there is, I understand, still to be a formal consultation in connection with these proposals. Would anyone else want to come in on this? Yes, Cam.
Good morning. So paragraph 77 refers to students' officers, and the fact that they've been subject to an assessment and have left and have resigned. Could you give an indication of what kind of things that have led to their resignation, and whether, as a result of the process that they've gone through, whether there have been any changes considered to the recruitment process or the learning and development process that's in place?
So the use in relation to misconduct here. So for officers committing misconduct or gross misconduct, where those allegations take place, for student officers, because they are still probationary under regulations, then we can pursue regulation 13 in those circumstances. So these are, in our view and in PSD's view, acts that were they outside of their probation, they would have been taken through the other police misconduct route. So therefore, being potentially in front of a hearing for gross misconduct. In those circumstances, it's more appropriate to use regulation 13 to follow that process to say, we have an allegation here that you've committed an act of gross misconduct, so therefore we're going to take you, and in the circumstances, it would be in front of a panel actually chaired by ACT O'Hara, who owns the regulation 13 process for us. In all of those circumstances so far in the last 12 months, we haven't tested it because they've all resigned beforehand. Whilst I can't give you the specifics for obvious reasons, what I can say is that both I and PSD are satisfied that they are acts of gross misconduct that we would have sought to put a full hearing and not recycling the regulation.
Is there anything within their conduct that could have been identified during the recruitment process or at an earlier stage of their training?
So for all of those cases, one of the things that I was asked PSD about is, was there anything we knew about the individual in terms of the vetting process? And we have, and I can't give the details because it's still live, but we have a case that's run at the moment where actually when I've sat with PSD, and we've all looked at it, there's a vetting decision that's been taken in the past under a different regime of PSD, and in fact under a different chief officer team. It was one individual that made the decision. We would all sit the question and think we probably should not have put that person through vetting. So there are some indications of it. Well, that was a decision that probably at the time was made in good faith, but we're looking through it through a different lens now, through societal changes, post-casing and so on. So for every case, we do go back and look at the individual's vetting record and ask ourselves, could we have done something different? Should we have?
And just one more question. How can we be sure that the whistleblower process is effective and staff have confidence in that process?
So I'll let Superintendent Singer just talk through what we do when it comes into the moment. What I would say is the process is changing. So at this moment in time, we have our own integrity line. As post the case review, the Metropolitan Police have piloted a national public line. So at the moment, our confidential reporting line is internal. It's for internal use. It's for me to pick the phone up and say, actually, I've seen something that I don't like. It's for people across the organisation. There isn't currently a public number for any use. So the normal route for that would be through Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers have now been commissioned by the NPCC to roll out a national integrity reporting line, which will be available to both officers but also the public, which hopefully the totality of that gives everybody more confidence in it, because Crime Stoppers are skilled already at managing confidential contacts with the public. This will be no different. The routine will be into the PSD. Do you want to just a bit about the confidence now?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so there's lots of work that we've done in PSD. So the boss mentioned before the prevention and intervention team. So the prevention and intervention team go around the force, give real inputs and presentations to people, to all officers and staff, encouraging them to report wrongdoing. So what we have seen from that work is people report things that probably in the past haven't been reported, either through the corruption line or via their standards managers or coming to us directly into professional standards. So we have seen an increase in that. Then in relation to kind of, we've got a clear policy which is in place in force, and if anyone does meet that criteria as a whistleblower, then we would kind of follow that process, working with legal, etc., to do that. So what I would say is from what we've seen, that confidence in the organisation is growing to kind of be up standards and whistleblowers, if that's the right term to use, and report more things into us, and we've seen that notable increase coming into us.
Thanks, Kath. Thank you. Tom.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner. It's actually building on Kath's question. So I was going to ask specifically about whistleblowing, but also just obviously marking our own homework about the various structures and processes we have in place around misconduct, whistleblowing and like. So my simple question is, have you given any consideration to having a big independent review of West Midlands Police to try and identify whether it really is in a place to either not have any other firearms unit incidents like what we've had and uncover anything else like it, or to really have an independent view to whether our process is a fit for purpose?
Sorry, you mean of the whole force or a PSD?
I mean, of the whole force.
No, we have not considered that.
But would you consider it?
Not. I don't know. I couldn't answer that. I need to go away and think about what we've achieved, what the outcomes are. What I would say is, PSD is probably the most scrutinised area of policing in terms of external stakeholders. So the work that Andrea and Ernie do in reviewing complaints, the work that the IOPC does, the fact that PSD has its own IAG. We are unique in having a counter-corruption unit that is looking into the spaces that aren't there. And so it is an area that's really heavily scrutinised, and we've got a lot of independent voices into there looking at patterns and behaviours. But in answer to your question, that I need to go away and think about that.
So I suppose just to clarify my question so that you can think about it in this light and then maybe come back again with time. But without an independent check, how are you confident that there isn't another firearms type scenario to be uncovered?
So I suppose an easier answer to that is to say that some of the events involved in the ETM, I can't talk about that because it is still live, although parts of it have been settled, like to over a decade ago. What I can tell you today is I could give you an example. Student officers in a part of the force that step forward and say, actually, we don't like the conduct of this sergeant. They step forward and put pen to paper about it. The sergeant is then moved somewhere, so not suspended but restricted. And then as a result of some further disclosures by somebody else saying, well, I'm still not, it would be being suspended from duty. And I think what the force has at the moment is a culture of people who will step forward and will challenge behaviours. And that is becoming even more prevalent as a result of the police uplift programme. Actually, what we're recruiting is lots and lots of young people are comfortable to step in the space and say, actually, that's not right. And I'm prepared to put pen to paper. And we see through the professional standard that countless examples of that, of people stepping forward. And actually, if you look at the number of supported cases that we've got where staff and officers across the organisation step forward, I think that adds to and shows a healthy culture of people being prepared to call out behaviour. And You know, I touched earlier on the fact that there are around 50 people suspended from the organisation, which sounds a lot, and it is a lot, but it's 0.5% of the police officers in the force, which means 99.5% of them are out there doing a great job every day, serving the public. So I think we are as confident as we can be. All of us struggles with our regular dialogue with all the people around this table, with IAG, with contacts, but actually we can continue to shine a light on those already.
Final quick comeback then on that. I mean, I've got massive respect for the police, okay, and I know that the vast majority are dedicating their life to do it, so that's really stressful and hard. But I don't accept that just because currently our stats show X number are bad, and that therefore means the rest are definitely absolutely fine. So I suppose in terms of whether you come back maybe to another meeting and say what kind of conclusion you came to on reflecting that question. If I'm in a community meeting, particularly with groups that are really worried about victims' concerns that haven't been heard properly by police, and that there's a culture of not taking grooming seriously, or whatever the accusation is, right or wrongly, if the decision is an independent view, definitely wouldn't add value. Just to beyond just your general confidence because of your feeling about what you've got in place is working, some real crystal clarity explanation about why that's not needed, or if actually on reflection maybe some independence, doesn't have to be the whole force, maybe it could be some selected areas you do decide is appropriate, then an explanation as to why that is the case as well.
But the answer is we don't have to agree. So you said you don't agree. We don't have to agree. That's healthy for us not to agree. But I can answer it now. We won't be doing an independent review of the whole force. And one of the reasons for that is the force is in engaged status with HMIC. We need to put our effort, the totality of the organisation's energy and effort in addressing the causes of concern to get the force out of engaged status as fast as possible. In 12, 18 months' time, whenever that conclusion owns, notwithstanding the Commissioner's ambition for when we get out, it's not our decision when we do. We need to do that. But at this moment in time, yes, we've got some relatively recent and also historic evidence of a culture within firearms. I'm confident enough to say that that culture does not exist across this whole force. I've been in policing for a long time. I've worked in 4 different police forces, 3 of them as a chief officer. I'm confident that there is already sufficient independent and external scrutiny of policing and of our cultures. And I would encourage all of us to continue to give communities confidence to report any of those things to policing, because for all of the examples where things go wrong, we can all give thousands and thousands and thousands of examples of where policing does protect and serve the public. And I want the organisation in the next 6, 12, 18 months to focus on addressing the issues that HMIC have raised in their calls of concern, to show that the feedback that the Chief gave to them, feedback that the Commissioner gave to them, is practice of the force in the past, but today it is the force that will continue to improve.
Just to note, engage doesn't mean that this is a separate issue. I mean, everything interrelates as well, doesn't it? In order to be able to do a fantastic job at protecting and responding to victims, you need to be really confident that the culture is right, our culture's misconduct. So I don't think it's fair characterisation to say that and then that, because I think it all interweaves. And secondly, I wasn't asking for you to agree with me. I don't even know what I think the right answer is. But what I do know we need, and you must surely agree with this, is if I'm going out talking to community meetings where their perception, particularly some of our key women's organisation partners, their perception is the job isn't being done right yet and their concerns over misconduct, to be able to give them those solid reasons beyond just the general sense that it's fine. So even if your view is firmly no, still, I feel like, and I know some other people agree with me, because we've been talking about it for months, we just need a little bit more that is accessible in those public conversations.
Yeah, so I think there are 2 differences. So firstly, I'm not suggesting that culture doesn't deliver performance. The 2 are intertwined because we own the totality of the whole organisation. We have a finite amount of resource, energy, intellectual capacity, and we need to focus very firmly on the causes of concern because they will be re-expensive. But at the same time, we need to balance that with the culture of the totality of the organisation. But the starting question was, would we consider doing an independent review of the culture whole organisation? No, because we just haven't got the capacity and bandwidth to manage doing that. But it's a slightly different question about what crystal clear things can we produce by our corporate committees to say, here's some of the things that we are doing that should have confidence in the public. So, for example, the work we heard from Sarah, who sat here before now, I'm not sure that many members of the public, back to the question earlier about how we inspire women to join policing. Well, how many young women in our communities know that the head of our operations department is a woman who is leading nationally on making sure that the handguns that we give to female armed officers are not the best fit, they are actually utilized. So there are lots of things that we are doing, and we will consider crystallising that in some way, but certainly would allow yourself, the commissioner, and the other assistant commissioner to be able to present that and say, here's a list of some things that we're not doing. So I'm happy to take that away and buy corporate comms.
Chief Constable, I have just one point before we bring this item to a conclusion. It's in connection with paragraphs 27 and 28. And at paragraph 27, it says, where wider learning is identified, the information is collated on the Centurion system, the prevention and intervention team will cascade the learning and ensure any organisational learning is shared and acted upon. If we have a look at the tables on page 6 of the report, we can see that in the 4 years that are recorded in terms of breakdown of top 10 allegations per financial year, that on each and every occasion of those 4 years, we've got police action following contact as being by far and away the most significant allegation in relation to a failure to deliver. And I just wonder, how is that wider learning then being cascaded to address, for example, that particular category, and how confident can we be that that learning is in fact being cascaded and acted upon?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll let Superintendent Sengar answer the first bit about how that learning is shared by the PSD team. I'll come back.
Yeah, so in terms of the learning, some of it is directly back to that officer and their supervisor as things are happening, because it's really important that feedback is timely. Don't wait to sit on it. So that's done immediately, straight away. Then we have our professional standards managers. So we have a regular forum with those managers who can influence their wider local policing areas or departments, and that's a bi-monthly meeting where we identify themes that they can take back to their respective areas. So that's just kind of two ways in how we do that. We've now got the PSD ambassadors that I've spoken about before, who we're going to regularly engage with, so they can transfer that knowledge. We use Team Talk, we use the internal intranet site. So there's a number of different ways that we cascade and share that training and that knowledge with the organisation and record that, just want to make sure that we've got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose in relation to the point on the table, Commissioner, that following police action, I think that relates to the points that I made earlier about the victim services assessment, the review that HMIC did of our crimes, the question from Bapinda about the way that we update victims of crime, and it is an area that the force continues to need to improve on, because actually, and I don't know the breakdown of those, but if you look at the numbers, a significant number of those will be people saying, I've reported something to you, you actually answered the phone pretty well, you came out pretty well, I've not heard from you again, I've not had sufficient contact, it's not been timely enough, it's not been quick enough, or you've not told me in the manner that I wanted. Somewhere in that will be the totality of a level of dissatisfaction. And it may well be the case that we've got nothing to say because we've investigated and not gone anywhere, but we've not been timely enough in giving those updates. And that is a bit that the force continues to strive to improve on. Hopefully see that data.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we will have to bring that agenda item to a conclusion, but thank you very much for the presentation and answering our questions, much appreciated. We'll now move then on to agenda item 7B, which is complaints and reviews. And Andrew Gavitas who is head of business support, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, is going to present in connection with that. Perhaps we can just present before saying about 3 minutes or so. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the third report that we brought to you annually on the performance of the police complaints review function. What the report sets out is how we support the Commissioner in his duty of oversight of the complaints against West Midlands Police and professional standards more generally, and also gives an annual performance update on the work that we do on complaints reviews. With regard to the oversight role, there was quite a few things that we look at to undertake that. We obviously have a report from Professional Standards Department, which is presented to us each year at this meeting. We also have quite a lot of data provided by the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And that's backed up by regular meetings with the Commissioner and the IOPC. Also, Ernie and myself have regular meetings with officers from the IOPC and regular meetings with the head of PSD as well. We think that gives us a pretty rounded picture of a lot of the activity that's taking place across the force in this area. But one of the most insightful things, I think, is the work that we do on complaints reviews. Now, how that operates is we have a delegated function to Ernie and myself. Ernie does all of the complaints reviews. I'm sort of back up really in case Ernie wasn't there for any reason and we needed some reviews doing. So Ernie is the font of all knowledge really on complaints reviews. When we do a review, what we are looking at is we don't reinvestigate. We look at whether the complaint was handled in a reasonable and proportionate way, and that's the function of the review. We found in terms of the numbers of reviews that we've done, it fluctuates over time and it largely follows the activity of the Professional Standards Department itself, as you might imagine. Last year, for example, the Professional Standards Department had a backlog of complaints, and then they did a really good job of reducing that backlog. But that then gave us quite a large number of reviews to deal with on the back of that, backlog being reduced. What we have found is the actual numbers of complaints have gone down over this year. So, for example, last year in 2022, we had 167 reviews. And yet in the first 6 months of this year, we've had about 35. We've had 35 reviews to the end of September. So we are seeing the trend is that the actual numbers are coming down, which we think is a very pleasing trend. And we're seeing that as an indication that the Professional Standards Department are doing a good job. One thing to mention is that our timeliness also fluctuates over time, depending on how busy we are. So at the moment, we have a target of completing all the reviews within 20 working days. And we're doing very well at the moment. We're doing them within 15 working days on average, which is, or even less in many cases, which is a really good service, we think, to members of the public who want a complaint review doing. And it also compares very well with other PCC's offices as well. So we're quite pleased with that. In terms of the outcomes from the reviews, again, just to reiterate, we're looking at whether they were reasonable and proportionate. And in just over, it's fairly consistent over the years that we've been doing it. In over 70% of cases, the reviewers found that the investigated complaint was handled in a reasonable and proportionate way, which is obviously good. That's the majority of complaints. There is also an option for us to make recommendations back to the Professional Standards Department, which Ernie does on a regular basis. It's obviously it's only a 3-year-old process, and year 1 and year 2, we found that quite an interesting dynamic because it was a new dynamic, and we have some pushback on some of the recommendations. But what we've now found, I think Ernie would agree, but no doubt he will tell you if it doesn't shortly, is that what we found now is that the relationship actually is very positive. And when we make the recommendations, it's a sort of healthy discussion about the recommendations. And in fact, all of the recommendations have been accepted and acted upon, which is good. So overall, I'll probably leave anything else for the questions stage. I will just mention dip sampling actually, because that's important. Another key activity we do is the dip sampling exercises, which we run twice a year. And we've done 2 this year. And in the majority of those, we looked at incivility, and then we looked at delivery service complaints. And in the majority of cases, we found that the people doing the dip sampling, which is board members backed up by members of staff from the OPCC, have found that the complaint was inspired confidence in the process. When they reviewed the file, they had confidence in the way that it was conducted. The concern that was raised on a number of occasions was in the letter writing, the outcome letters that were sent to complainants. Quite a few people doing the dip sampling highlighted that they could have been a little bit more empathetic in the style of the letter writing. And just to summarise then, because I must be done with my 3 minutes by now, so I'm in the last few seconds, is that we've overall, we think that the reviews have given us a good degree of confidence in the work of professional standards, and highlight that the professional standards department is performing well this year, certainly in comparison to last year and the year before. And we summarise that from the outcomes of the reviews, from the fact that the numbers of reviews are going down, and also from the different exercises that we've done. So I think I'll leave it at that. But obviously, Ernie and myself will answer any questions if people have them.
Thanks very much. Has anybody got any questions that they want to raise? Yes, Sharon.
When you talk about that 15 days to complete a review, what is the communication with the complainant within that 15 days? Because to me, 15 days feels kind of long. I'd probably have forgotten about it and be really upset and telling the world that they haven't got back to me and they've got issues.
Yeah, no, you are right about that. I've been having conversations with Emerson about how we can try and reduce that time period down to maybe 10 days or so. I will talk to complainants about the complaint if they ask me to. I'm very happy to do that. We've done that before. We've invited people in to watch CCTV footage with the help of PSD, and that's always been welcomed by complainants, certainly. I think 15 days is what it is now, approximately. We're still outperforming many of the OPCCs and forces that are a similar size by margin. Average, I think, is usually it's like 50 days or something. But again, as Andrew has pointed out, that depends entirely on the volume we're receiving. Reviews, they're quite complex sometimes. They're, I write them are very detailed, and they do take time. And I'd rather take a little bit more time over them and give complainants the value that they're looking for, and I put more thorough explanation than it take a little bit longer than knock it out in a day or two, and give us something which I know that they're going to come back at on us.
Are you saying that you would only communicate with them if they were to come back to you and ask, why is this process taking so long? Isn't there a mechanism in between, or do you tell them beforehand? Good to do time, and not just the kind of, we're still working on it, you do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a process which means that when we initially receive the application for review, there's something on there that says we aim to complete the review within, I think it's 28 days actually. And we make them aware of that. But then in the meantime, if we extend that time period and they come back to us, we'll often send them an email and say, look, we're really sorry. Well, in the past I've spoken to people and say, look, we're really sorry due to demand. We're really struggling. It might take us a little bit longer to complete the review. But once I give them a date after that initial contact with them, I always really work hard to try and stick to that, because the worst thing we can do is undermine that after having made, if you like, a second promise.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we're going to have to bring it to a conclusion, but I've just got one quick question for you, Ernie. Could you just give us one good example of the way in which the complaints process has been improved as a consequence of either the dip sampling exercise or the recommendations that you've made following a review?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of dip sampling and oversight, and then there's a broader picture here as well around oversight. So there was some concern about the details that were coming out, the letters that the PSD were writing. Well, now I can categorically say that the detail is there. I made some comments about the consistency of reviews of handlers. So you get one of them that was really good at doing the reviews and others that was less so. Obviously, people's skills are different. But once I communicated that was responded to. And now I can honestly tell there's a consistency across all of the team, the whole service one, the recovery team. They now talk to complainants, whereas I think, as Andrea said, I think that we've played a real key role in performance of PSD and certainly what they're delivering around Team 1 and lower level investigations. And I really do believe that they're doing, it's hard for me to say, Commissioner, it is, but they're doing a good job. Credit where it's absolutely due. And that's confirmed by the ILPC, who we meet regularly and we have discussions with them. So they are doing a good job. A few examples, I could give you many more. Before I close, I'd just like to make a quick comment about the team. We're a very small team. My role's solitary, and I work very closely with Emerson and Andrea, and I actually welcome their support. As you know, I've sat here for the past 3 years and spoken about investigations. Complaints, I believe, are a window into operational policing, gives a really good understanding of what's happening on the ground. And I've gone on about the investigations. This year, I'm really pleased to say that some of the work after has been reflected in Operation Vanguard, which is about the uplifting FCIB and what they're doing in terms of making the whole process a lot better. One thing I will put out to the table to you now while you're here, Deb, is the way in which neighbourhood officers teams deal with neighbourly disputes. You say about allegations going up. Well, a neighbourly dispute can go on for 7 years. I did one the other week, 10 officers, 42 allegations. There's something about that service that we provide there, and we use lots of multi-party parts that isn't quite connecting. So I'll put that on the table now, and we'll look for improvement, and hopefully I'll be able to come back with some positive news next year and say, like I have just with PSD, they're doing a really good job in that area of delivery as well. Commissioner.
Thanks very much. In the interest of time, we're going to have to move on, but thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Verdi, for coming on, attending and presenting your report, answering our questions. Much appreciated. I have a statutory responsibility for oversight and scrutiny of complaint handling, acting as an independent review body, segregating complaints against the Chief Constable. It's never been more important as a consequence of high-profile national events such as the conviction and sentencing of David Carrick and the Cater review to ensure public have trust and confidence in the Professional Standards Department and the complaints and reviews process. And I maintain oversight and scrutiny of these matters in a variety of ways, including the annual report to my board, quarterly meetings with the head of professional standards, my team meet quarterly with the Independent Office for Police Conduct Oversight Manager, and I have quarterly meetings with the IOPC Regional Director. And I have an opportunity to obtain oversight of the complaints function as a result of the insight gained during the complaints review process, and to use this as a lever to positively influence the complaints system. In order to maintain trust and confidence policing, it's essential the public have trust and confidence in the complaints and review process, because that's one way in which the public are able to hold policing to account. And I therefore take all of the opportunities available to me in order to ensure that I maintain oversight and scrutiny in the complaints review process and police professional standards. Agenda item 8 is performance report, and that agenda item is to be presented by Deputy Chief Constable Scott Green. Over to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is an overview of the performance measures that are measured against the national crime and policing measures. So not the totality of the force performance, but specifically to comment on all of those. I'll take the report as read, but I'll just point some of the highlights. So at point 6 there, you will see that in the first 6 months of this year, we have now taken the median time for our response to P1 calls to 13 minutes and 2 seconds, which is a considerable improvement on where the force has been in the past. Similarly, in relation to P2, which is where we are updating the member of the public that were there within an hour, the median time is now 69 minutes, which again is considerably quicker than where we were this time last year. But there is still work to do in that area because 35% of those incidents were within 1 hour, which means a significant number outside of it. We, of course, monitor and measure the outliers, but we're not where we need to go. I'll just touch on that very briefly. So we are undertaking a full review of the totality of the number of incident grades that we have. Is at the moment we have 9 incident grades. I can tell you, having worked in 3 other forces other than this one, no other force has 9 incident categories. We're going to move to either 3 or 4, which will be we're there straight away, we're there in an hour, or we'll make an appointment. Not having that because it overcomplicates the picture. You'll see at pages 10 and 11 that we do monitor both the response times for those incidents, P1 and P2, in the domestic abuse and missing persons category. They do take longer to get there. There are reasons for that, which I can articulate. The main reason for domestic abuse is the time that they come in, because they're competing against themselves and they're competing against the busiest time in a 24-hour day for policing. So they always lay slightly outside of that, albeit we're getting very close to 15 minutes again for those. And the missing persons is often because there are inquiries that officers can do en route to a home address, which sometimes delays it. Just want to move on then to the serious violence at section 15. You will see that we have reduced in the last 12 months, reduction of 25 compared to the baseline that we were originally using. Importantly, we've had a reduction of 31 compared to the previous 12 months in relation to the recording of lethal barreled firearms discharges, which is a significant achievement. It's almost a third of our firearms discharges, and we continue to recover more firearms. We've recovered 139 in the reporting period, 17 more than the previous year, which again indicates that work. The use of Project Guardian at 22 and 23 is our use of patrols in those localities. You will be aware, Commissioner, because we've discussed it before, that we did have some feedback from the Home Office about where we were allowed to use the money and where we were allowed to put our officers, and we declined to be dictators around that because we patrol the areas that we can. So these are the hotspots where the public expect to see us. But what we're seeing as a result of all that is a reduction in serious youth violence. In relation to drugs and county lines, we've seen an increase of 32% since the recording of drugs offences, which is a positive indicator of our proactive work. We continue to work to close the lines down. You'll see in this reporting period 67 lines closed down, and that work continues. In relation to neighbourhood crime, in this reporting period, we have seen a reduction of around 20% in relation to residential burglary. Personal robbery remains a challenge, and the levels of recorded personal robbery are still high. There are lots of reasons for that. One of them is the demographics of our population, particularly the age profile. However, we have seen the highest detection level for 5 years now, apart from during the lockdown period, which is making a significant difference. Vehicle crime, continue to see a reduction in vehicle crime, but as I've emphasised before at this meeting, it's worth noting that reduction is against a vast increase of over 22%. So we need to continue to monitor and maintain reductions in vehicle crime in particular. Theft from person, we've seen an increase in the reporting of theft from person. 20% of all thefts occur in the city centre, and we are doing lots of work with licensed officers in the city centre, particularly to encourage people to keep their phones and wallets safe, but also to return to licensed premises the next day, because to any licensed premises you'll find they've got a big box full of phones that people have lost. So that work needs to continue, but we are detecting significantly more theft in person than we were this time last year. I'm going to move us on, if I may, just in relation to the survey data and the responses that we get in relation to that. We continue to use the QR code in particular for a quick response to stop and search, which amongst all of the satisfaction surveys that forces can do, I think remains a really innovative thing. In the first 10 months, 457 responses in total. We still got work to do on that, still pushing people to use it more, but I think it's a really responsive service for the public. And then the final area that I'll just touch on is cybercrime. The levels of reporting of cybercrime remains high. You'll see there at 49, the reported losses is over 41 million. We continue to engage with cyber security awareness. As I've discussed before at this board, we will, where local businesses are affected by cyber offences, as well as reporting it to the national line, we will put our economic crime unit in touch with local businesses, whilst we might not have a live investigation, to ensure that they're getting all the support that they can professionalise their service to protect our local businesses and local economy. And I'm really content, particularly for the forums that board members go to when you get a local business been affected by cybercrime. If you want to push them our way, we will, outside of non-reporting methods, engineer some support for them. And that's it really in relation to today's report, because this report is based on audited data at a set period of time. So I'm happy to answer any questions. In my later operational update, I will touch on some of the current performance trends that the board's got, because that's not based on audited data. I'm happy to answer any questions. Commissioner, in relation to that report.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Constable. Got any comments, question, matter rising? Yes, Bhupinder and then Cal.
Thanks, Commissioner. Very, very quickly. Paragraph 35, obviously. Do we know what our figures are compared to other forces across the UK? Because this is a national problem we've got where vehicles are being thrown into parts.
Yeah, we do. I can tell you that we remain an outlier in terms of our MSG in relation to the levels of vehicle crime. It is one of the things that I've noticed, which I do think is relatively unique for metropolitan force, but I wasn't expected to see it, is our trends for vehicle crime are different depending on the geographical areas. So in some of our LPAs, there is a high percentage of theft of vehicles, and in some of our areas, there's a high percentage of theft from vehicles. And you would expect in a flying force for those trends to be the same. So one of the things that has highlighted is the value of a local policing model, because it allows me then to hold our individual chief supers to account for slightly different tactics. So in Birmingham, for example, the biggest fall that we've seen is in the theft from vehicles, which is actually really reassuring, because that theft from was driven by theft from that I might have thought when I was a young cop, which was somebody putting the window through and stealing something in the car. That theft from was parts from the vehicle. So those are really abhorrent offences of people returning to their car and finding the front bumper's gone, you know, wings gone and so on. So it's seen a significant reduction of that in Birmingham. If I give you another, for instance, so in Dudley, we still see high levels of theft of vehicles. That's predominantly driven, most of our theft of vehicles is driven by car key burglaries. It is much harder to steal cars now, as we all know. But actually, it's a more aggravated offence then, because it's somebody breaking into a house to steal keys to then steal a car. So we still see high levels of that. We remain an outlier. So we remain an outlier compared to our most similar group for vehicle crime. We are reducing it, we continue to reduce it. We've still got work to do. We've got to keep our eye on vehicle crime.
That's 36 talks about the exploitation of vulnerable individuals associated with car property. Could you tell us what that might look like, and how the police and possibly other agencies are looking to help those individuals?
Yeah, so particularly in relation to chop shops. So what that might look like is vehicles, and sometimes these can be very expensive, you know, top-end vehicles that might be stolen and held and stored somewhere, either for demarking and remarking, so it appears to be a legitimate vehicle, or to be shipped overseas. Somebody might be exploited to stay there and guard those vehicles. But similarly, because of the cost of vehicles and the shortage of new vehicles, and therefore the increase in prices of second-hand vehicles, we've got more second-hand vehicles on the road as a percentage across the whole of the UK than we would have done in the past. Yeah, vehicles. So therefore, those vehicles need parts, which is why we see vehicles being stolen to then be stripped down. So taking to chop shops and stripped down. And we've got intelligence to suggest sometimes you get exploited people in those premises being used to strip down those vehicles. What we've done through the Vehicle Task Force, but also through Operation Advance now, is every time we've done an Operation Advance, is those LPAs identify where they think the chop shops are, and then using our operational assets and the local agency to go and conduct them. I do think it's what's a coincidence, Kath, but when I went to Operation Advance on Birmingham, I went out with one of the teams at 6 o'clock in the morning, went and did a chop shop with the local policing team. And it's one of the advantages we've got from running Operation Advance. The local policing team set for some time We really want to get in that premises, but it's going to need a few of us. So because of operational advantage, with the totality of the force resources there, we went through the door, was utter coincidence that me and Mandy were there, but inside it, 2 stolen cars that we were able to reunite with people as well. We've got to stand on that. We're to exploiting people in there. You do look at the vehicles and think somebody's got to strip those vehicles down, and that could lead to that level of exploitation.
Are we talking young people who are encouraged to do it for money or for others, or are we talking older people?
So predominantly younger people, because as we know, if we look at county lines and we look at that sort of criminal exploitation of young people, pay professionals and adults would look and say that young person's being exploited. That young person themselves might not think they're being exploited because they might think that's taking cash in my hand. But it's our lifestyle we want to be involved in. The actual theft of the vehicles, particularly those high-end ones, is not necessarily young people, because it is difficult to steal vehicles and it usually involves a level of criminality and investigation.
Thank you very much. Sure.
Thanks, Commissioner. Super quickly, how do you kind of interpret this kind of performance data and report in the context of Engage? What does it mean to you?
So, so we've been engaged for causes of concern. But of course, the decision to engage by His Majesty's Chief Inspector is his decision. And of course, it's not just the 4 causes of concern, it's the totality of recorded crime versus our outcomes. And if you look at the data set that HMIC have used, and I think it's an important question, because the Chief has given his response publicly, which was to say, actually, we could use different data set. But from the forces perspective now, we've drawn a line under that, because HMIC are our independent inspectors, they're independent advocates on behalf of the public. And as the Chief has publicly said, we have huge respect for both our own HMI, for the Chief Inspector, and for their organisation. And the data set that they've used is accurate, and it is, and the force does need to perform in a number of areas. So what this allows us to do, and our comparison with our most similar groups, allows us to look at where do we sit in context. So I'll give you a very quick, for instance. So if you looked at some of this reporting, would show that our detection rates, positive outcomes, is not where it wants to be. But if you look at the current period that we're in now, so live data, our detection rates for neighbourhood crimes, for robbery is now 12%, which is the highest in our most similar group. For burglary, it is now 10%, which is the highest in our most similar group. For homicide, our detection rate is now double Merseyside, West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester Police. Our overall crime reductions, we estimate we were going to reduce by 10% by the end of March, based on current data. We appear to be reducing crime more than most other forces in the country. So we have to interpret both the data set that HMIC use, which is right and proper, which is audited data shared with our Home Office, using a number of systems, with where we currently sit. And so that was the point the Chief was making. What we've got to do now is continue that. We've got to measure ourselves, because one of the things that is really important is the impact that we have on the average. So we are an outlier for the levels of recorded vehicle crime. So if we reduce by a set amount, we have to remember we have such an impact on the average that as we reduce down, the average moves away from us. And that's the same in terms of our recorded street robbery. So all of those things we need to continue to progress and show that the trajectory that the force has been on in the last kind of 6 to 9 months is sustained and will continue to be sustained and be embedded. But also at the same time, looking at the causes of concern that HMIC have identified, and show that the improvements that we've made in those areas are fixed and fixed for good, not fix them for a short period of time, because the difference between the cause of concern and an area for improvement is cause of concern gets re-inspected. So for an area for improvement, I'm allowed by HMIC to say, I'm satisfied that we fix that now and I can sign it off. We don't do that for cause of concern, we will be re-inspected on all those areas. So we need to fix those whilst understanding the performance data. It's report here, we'll get questions answered.
That's the last 10 minutes.
Well, let's move on. Agenda item 9 is Deputy Chief Constable update, and that's an update on Operation Policing must be discussed in the public domain. Deputy Chief Constable.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, 2 or 3 things, and I will just pull out a couple more of the positives because I think they might be useful. So I touched on this in an earlier update. Operationally, we continue to be involved heavily in the policing of protest activity. So particularly under Operation Biotast, the protests associated with the events in both Gaza and Israel. We continue to be presented with that. It is a challenge for the whole of the police service, not just in terms of resourcing, but in terms of maintaining our impartiality, finding that balance. But it's an operationally busy time. As I reported to you, Commissioner, at the start of the week, we've also seen an increase in some other protest activity around the environment. So we've seen some Extinction Rebellion protests. We've seen some other. They might have described themselves as protests. We thought they were criminal acts and the individuals were arrested. But it just feels that we've just seen a slight increase in protest activity across the force area, which we need to stay on top of. That's, of course, associated with the same time of year when it's a busy football calendar as well. There's a lot of football clubs, so actually the demands on the organisation are there. It also is a time of the year where we've seen an increase in some of those crime types that we talked about, which are those seasonal changes in crimes that we see around burglary in particular. So darker nights join in. We need to maintain the levels that we've seen, which is a reduction on where we were last year, but just be alive to the fact that this time of year we do see an increase in some of those crime types. We had a very tragic and notable homicide, which I can share because it's been reported in the public domain, where we charged 2 12-year-olds with homicide. It's a very difficult investigation for those involved in it, and that will progress its way through the courts. And then I think it's probably an operational update, but I'll mention it now because it kind of answers Ernie's point as well about neighbour disputes and those quality of life issues. Yesterday and today, we have brought one of the country's leading academics in problem solving, Sylvia Chenery, into force, who is a judge on the National Tilly Awards. So Tilly Awards being the National Awards for Problem Solving, who is training our neighbourhood officers, but also key partners. So local authority colleagues, housing association colleagues, on problem solving, working in communities, which hopefully will see a real opportunity to reduce demand, but also to solve some of those problems. So we're not in the future listening to it's taken 7 years to resolve it because we're doing some training in relation to that. I think that's it, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Constable. I don't know if you wanted to provide just some reflections and update in connection with the decision of HMIC in relation to Engage as well.
So, as I said earlier, the Chief is at his annual conference, but I remain in touch with him. I think the Chief has spoken on behalf of the force and given his view on the decision and the data set. We, the force, will not be giving any more commentary on that decision. We respect the decision, respect the His Majesty's Chief Inspector who's made the decision, respect the HMI herself, and the totality of the organisation. We find ourselves where we are. In January, as you're aware, Commissioner, the Chief Constable will attend PPOG, which is the Police Performance Oversight Group, to give an update on the force's progress in relation to all of the performance changes that the force have brought about under his leadership as the Chief, and where we think we are in relation to those causes of concern. From our internal perspective as a Chief Officer team, we are very comfortable with the performance improvements that the force has seen, particularly since April, since the restructure remains on track. So there won't be any discernible changes. There were some tweaks to some of our meetings. So we had already planned to change the way that we manage our response to HMIC with a monthly meeting, which culminates in a meeting chaired by me. There will be an open invite to your Chief Executive Commissioner to that meeting to allow you some eyes on the inside of it. But we're comfortable that all the things that we're doing will take the force in the right direction. The Chief will present in January. We'll get some feedback at that point on what the process looks like in relation to it. What I would say very briefly is Our crime recording audits at the moment show that we record between 90 and 95% of our crime accurately, which for a force that in the past was at 70%, shows that all of our success around reducing crime is not based on the inaccuracy of data. Crime levels are down 6% from October 22 to September 23, based on the same period last year. We appear to reduce crime by more than other forces. We appear now to have gone under the levels of the other comparable force of our size. We estimate we're reducing by 10%. In December 2022, we were arresting around 3,300 people a month. In October 23, we arrested 4,300, so in effect a third increase. In December 2022, our arrest rate for domestic abuse was around 28%. At the moment, based in October, it was just under 40%, which is an increase. Our detection rate has gone from 6% to 8%. In terms of the causes of concern, so one of those was the online child sexual exploitation team. Those packages waited for enforcement. It was at 130, it's now at 20. Within 20 is a kind of normal churn for a force of this. The national average for outcomes for RASO offences is 4%. We're currently 6%. So lots and lots of the work that we're doing is current based on today. Just to reiterate, we accept HMIC's findings as a force because it's based on the data set that they use. It is a recording of what they found. But like you, Commissioner, Chief Constable, I, Pete and the ACCs are determined on behalf of the public of the West Midlands Police that we do everything that we can restore confidence by satisfying His Majesty's Chief Inspector that we don't require engagement for any longer than is necessary. It is a supportive process. We will be doing work with the college and other forces that they point us in the direction of. We are determined to show the progress that we are making. We continue to make. We would wish to be in engaged status for as short a time as possible, satisfying your office, Commissioner, also most importantly the public of the West Midlands. This is a force that they can have confidence in.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Constable. That's much appreciated. Agenda item 10 is Strategic Policing Crime Board Work Plan, and that consists of the work plan and actions and future lines of inquiry, which are both simply for noting today. There are 3 actions. Action 1 is pending, Action 2 has been dealt with today, and Action 3 has been dealt with today. And therefore, please note that there are currently no agreed actions outstanding. Agenda item 11 is date of the next meeting, and that will be Tuesday, 19th of December 2023. I want to thank everyone who's attended and contributed to this meeting of the Strategic Policing Crime Board today. It's much appreciated, and that completes the agenda for the meeting of the board. And I formally declare this meeting of the board closed. Thank you.